If you like the story, you can support the author on Patreon. Link is in the description.
Chapter 21 The Heart of the Beast. The air grew heavier the deeper they went. Pipes lined the walls like veins, dripping with oil that smelled sharp and bitter. Every step echoed against steel floors, the sound swallowed quickly by the low hum of machines that never slept. When the Marines finally reached the engine deck, even Gaius slowed for a moment. The chamber stretched wider than a city block, a cavern of metal and shadow. Huge cylinders pulsed with faint, sickly light. Chains rattled in the distance as if the ship itself was groaning. And then they saw them. Servitors shuffled between the machines, half-human bodies twisted with cables and steel. Their skin was pale and waxy, eyes glassy and unfocused. They were not free beings but tools, wired into the ship, forever bound to its engines. Closer to the center stood the dark mechanicum. They wore long robes, but the cloth could not hide what they had become. Their arms ended in drills and blades, their faces masked with brass, cords running into their flesh. Some no longer looked like men at all, more machine than anything living. Tony was the first to break the silence. Okay, I thought haunted houses are creepy, especially at night. This wins. By a mile. Naruto frowned, his voice lower than usual. Those aren't people anymore, are they? Saeko's hand tightened on her sword. They might have been people a long time ago. Now they're just abominations. Mindy, usually quick with sharp words, said nothing. She stared at the broken forms, her mouth pressed into a thin line. The dark mechanicum noticed them. The air filled with the sound of clicking gears and chattering in a machine-like tongue. A dozen pairs of glowing eyes turned toward the intruders. And then, without a word, the enemy attacked. The deck came alive with chaos. Servitors lurched forward, their limbs reshaped into saws, drills, and crude cannons. Sparks lit the dark as they stumbled toward the Marines. Gaius did not wait. He lifted his bolter in one smooth motion. The first shot thundered, and a servitor's head vanished in a mist of fire and metal. His brothers spread out in perfect coordination, their own bolters roaring in steady rhythm. Every round hit with purpose. Limbs snapped off. Metal plating burst. The air filled with smoke and the high-pitched whine of straining servos. Man, it's like a horror movie, Tony muttered from the chat, watching above Gaius. Except the monsters are made of spare parts. Naruto winced. They're not even fighting because they want to. They're being forced. Saeko's tone was cold but steady. Then mercy means ending them quickly. Mindy finally spoke, her voice quiet. I don't like this. At all. The Ultramarines pressed forward, their discipline turning the fight into a storm of controlled violence. Every step they took was marked by gunfire and the sharp crash of metal on metal. From the shadows came something far larger than the others. A construct built of pipes and plating, almost the size of a tank, crawled forward on thick claws. Its head was nothing more than a furnace with burning coals for eyes. It roared like tearing steel and charged straight at Gaius. The ground shook as it moved, knocking over broken servitors in its path. Gaius did not flinch. He waited until the last moment, then stepped aside, his sword flashing from his thigh in a single motion. The creature swung its claw, but Gaius was already moving. He fired his bolter point blank, the shells punching holes into its armor. Sparks rained across the deck. The thing staggered, but it didn't stop. With a sharp shout, Gaius swung his power sword in a wide arc. The blade cut deep, splitting the construct across its torso. The beast let out one last shriek of grinding metal before collapsing in two smoking halves. The dark mechanicum howled in their machine tongue, their voices harsh and broken. Some of them rushed to consoles, their hands flying across corrupted controls. Lights flared across the chamber. Warning alarms began to scream. Gaius turned his bolter toward the nearest tech priest. A burst of shots cut him down, his mechanical body sparking as it crumpled. Another fell with a sword strike that sent wires and oil flying through the air. The fight dragged on, but it was never truly in doubt. The Ultramarines fought like a tide, each move smooth, each shot measured. Servitors fell by the dozen. Abominations were hacked apart until nothing moved but the humming reactor. Finally, silence fell. Smoke drifted slowly through the vast chamber. Fires burned where fuel lines had burst. The only sound was the steady, living heartbeat of the reactor itself. Naruto let out a shaky breath. That was too much. From the gore and death he had now seen. Saeko, her eyes focusing. It's war. This is what they do. Tony sighed into the chat. I hate to say it, but Saeko's right. This is war. And that, he gestured to the broken machines, was a factory of nightmares. Mindy whispered, no one should ever have to see something like this. Gaius walked to the reactor. The massive machine pulsed like a diseased heart, its glow faint and sickly green. He could see where the dark mechanicum had twisted it, feeding wires into places they did not belong. From his belt, he drew a set of melted charges. The devices gleamed dull in the dim light. He knelt, finding a weak point at the base of the core, and began strapping the charges in place. 4 minutes, 30 seconds, he said simply, his deep voice steady. Tony's head shot up. 4 minutes. That's not a lot of time. Calculating how far they were from the torpedoes. Naruto's eyes widened. Wait, you're setting a bomb? Here. Saeko's tone was calm, almost resigned. He knows the way out. That's all that matters. Mindy bit her lip. And if he's wrong? No one answered. Gaius worked with quiet focus, his armored hands moving with care. When the charges were in place, he shifted a tangle of cables and plating to hide them from view. If the enemy returned, they would not find them in time. He rose and gestured with a single hand. His warriors moved at once, spreading through the chamber. Heavy doors were sealed shut. Bulkheads slammed into place. The exits were blocked, one by one. From the far end of the chamber came the sound of banging, metal fists against doors. The enemy had arrived. Soon, the chamber would be swarming again. Naruto's voice trembled. They're already pounding on the doors. Gaius, you don't have much time. Tony groaned. 4 minutes? That's cutting it way too close. You're insane. Since he was with the journey, and back to the boarding torpedoes were quite far. Saeko spoke calmly. If anyone can push through in time, it's him. She doesn't even knows why, she believes at Gaius, but she just can feel he'll win. Mindy muttered. Still feels like a time bomb is ticking down near me. At last, Gaius raised his hand again. The gesture was clear. They would fall back. They would not stop. No one argued. No one questioned. The sound of pounding on the doors grew louder, louder, until it was almost deafening. Sparks burst from the hinges. Something outside was cutting through. Gaius lowered his hand, his voice firm but calm. Forward. Chapter 22 Breakneck Escape. The ship shook as another explosion ripped through its broken core. Warning lights flared red along the walls, sparks showering from broken pipes. The air stank of burning oil, blood, and scorched metal. Gaius stood at the head of his squad. 11 of his brothers looked to him. No fear in their eyes, only trust. He lifted his hand, voice sharp and clear over the vox. Formation spear. Primaris with me. The rest behind. We run for the breach. Do not falter. Do not scatter. The 2 towering Primaris stepped forward, taking their place at his side. Behind them, 9 battle brothers formed into a tight wall, bolters ready. The reason was simple, the Primaris and Gaius would eat the air resistance and carve the path, letting those behind save stamina and keep weapons steady. A human would not have thought of such a thing in the middle of chaos. But these were Astartes. Their every step was measured, every action meant to win. Gaius raised his power sword, its blue field hissing to life. Charge! And they ran. The sound was like thunder. 12 giants, each armored in ceramite and moving faster than most cars, tore down the steel corridor. 70 kilometers per hour. The deck shuddered beneath them, dents forming where boots hit. Sparks burst from metal panels that could not withstand their weight. Their formation held, perfect and tight, like the head of a spear tearing through the belly of the ship. With the speed of Gaius and the limited distance of how far they can go, they were being pulled by him at his speed. The chat group could only watch, wide-eyed. Tony's voice cracked through first. Wait, how the hell are they moving that fast? That's as fast as a car on the highway. And in that armor, he looks like a tank. Naruto was half in awe, half shouting. You can't stop that. You'd just get crushed. Saeko's eyes were shock, and even her tone carried awe. Their formation doesn't break even at this speed. It's like a living spear. Mindy's voice was quiet, almost a whisper. I can feel the ground shaking just watching this. Servitors and broken slaves lurked ahead, blocking the way. The twisted things barely had time to lift their crude blades before they were torn apart. Gaius didn't slow. He raised his bolter with one hand, sword in the other, and fired bursts with perfect aim. Each round struck a skull, a chest, a machine heart. Enemies exploded in fire and blood, their bodies thrown aside as if by an invisible plow. The two Primaris joined him, their heavier bolters roaring. Metal and flesh shattered in the storm of fire. Behind them, the 9 Marines cleaned up what remained, finishing stragglers with quick bursts before any could lunge at the spear. It was not a sprint through chaos. It was a sprint of order, of timing. Each Marine knew when to fire, when to reload, when to breathe. Even at 70 km an hour, their kill zone was perfect. To the chat, it looked unreal. Tony ran a hand through his hair, eyes wide. This isn't even war. This is, hell, I don't even know what this is. They're shooting like it's target practice while running full tilt. Naruto slammed his hand at his chest. They're killing everything down. Nothing stands a chance. Saeko nodded slowly in awe. Controlled violence. Nothing wasted. Mindy hugged her arms around herself in shocked. The final bulkhead loomed ahead, sealing the corridor that led to their escape point. Beyond it, Gaius could sense enemies waiting, weapons raised. He didn't slow. At the last second, he shifted his weight forward, bracing his massive frame. His shoulder slammed into the blast door with the force of a battering ram. The steel screamed as it ripped from its hinges. It flew across the hall like a giant's shield tossed aside, slamming into the waiting line of slaves. One unlucky wretch was flattened beneath it, crushed into paste. The squad didn't stop. They charged through the gap like a storm. Tony blinked, lost for words. I don't even, he just turned a blast door into a frisbee. Naruto was yelling. That was insane. He didn't even break stride. Just, boom. Door gone. Mindy looked pale. This guy's terrifying. They reached the place where the boarding torpedoes had smashed into the ship. The twisted hull still glowed faintly from the entry burns. This was the hole they had carved to enter, and now, their only way out. Gaius lifted his hand. Form a perimeter. Hold until Thunderhawk arrives. He opened Vox. Pick us up now. 1 minute, 29 seconds until the core detonates. The Tech Marine's voice answered, calm even under pressure. Confirmed, my captain. Thunderhawk inbound. Arrival in 40 seconds. The squad locked their bolters and took position, the ring of steel forming instantly. The enemy came like a flood. Dozens of mortal slaves, screaming as they charged, crude blades raised. Behind them came hulking berserkers with wires drilled into their flesh, their arms replaced with jagged claws. And behind them, the real threat, iron warriors. Their grey armor shone with scratches and scars, their heavy weapons already roaring. Bolter fire tore through the slaves, ripping them apart in sprays of red. Still, more came, climbing over the dead, driven forward like cattle. The iron warriors didn't care. Their autocannons chewed through their own slaves just to hit the Astartes. The corridor filled with blood and shrapnel. Tony's jaw dropped. They don't even care, they're hitting their own guys. Naruto clenched his fists. They're just throwing lives away. Saiko's face was hard. That might be their way of fighting. Cold. Ruthless. Mindy whispered. I hate this. Gaius' voice cut over Vox. 58 seconds before detonation. The squad dug in. Bolters answered fire with fire, slamming traitors back into cover. Explosions shook the hall as shells ripped through walls and corpses alike. The air turned to smoke, sparks, and steel rain. And still, the Ultramarines did not break. Then came the roar. The Thunderhawk gunship broke through the smoke, void shields glowing. Its 4 heavy bolters lit the corridor with streams of fire, each burst chewing apart walls and traitors alike. The Iron Warriors stumbled back into cover, even their stubbornness shaken under that storm. The gunship swooped lower, close enough for its engines to blow corpses across the hall. Tony's face lit up. Now that's space support. Where do I sign up for one of those? Naruto grinned wide and with stars in his eyes. It's like a flying ninja beast spitting fire. Saeko gave a small nod. Perfect timing and good precision. Mindy exhaled hard. Thank God. The Thunderhawk slammed down, its ramp lowering like the mouth of salvation. Fall back. Gaius ordered. The Marines moved as one, firing as they stepped back, their formation unbroken. They didn't turn their backs, didn't show a single gap. Bolters thundered until they were safely inside. At the ramp, Gaius turned. He raised his sword in salute, the blade catching the Thunderhawk's lights, before the ramp sealed shut. Inside, the air was heavy with gunpowder and sweat. The chapter serfs sat at their stations, piloting and manning the guns. When Gaius looked at them, they all rose, except the pilot, and struck the Roman salute. Right fist over heart, head bowed. It was not empty show. It was devotion. Loyalty. Gaius gave a single nod, accepting it. That was all they needed. The Thunderhawk lifted, engines howling. Outside, the strike cruiser fired covering bursts to clear their path. Gaius stood tall, eyes fixed on the enemy ship behind. 5. 4. 3. 2. 1. The enemy fortress erupted. First a small burst, then the whole core went critical. Fire swallowed steel, tearing the massive ship apart. Shards of armor and fireballs scattered across the void, rolling like a collapsing star. The pilot wove through the storm of debris with surprising skill. The Thunderhawk dodged chunks of steel bigger than tanks, spinning through the burning wreck with perfect timing. Gaius tilted his head, as if judging whether to take the controls himself. Then, finally, he said one thing. Good job. The serf's hands trembled slightly on the controls. He wanted to kneel, to show more respect, but he could not while flying. Instead, he bowed his head, pride burning in his chest. The Thunderhawk sped clear, leaving only fire and broken metal behind. Chapter 23 No Rest for the Chosen. The Thunderhawk's engines roared as it slid into the hangar of the Oath of Rectitude. The cavernous bay was already alive with motion, serfs in grey tunics rushed across the deck, carrying crates of ammunition. Sparks flew from welding torches as repair crews swarmed over the armored hulls. The air smelled of fuel, machine oil, and incense. As soon as the landing clamps seized the gunship, the forward ramp groaned open. Gaius stepped out first, his massive armored boots shaking the deck plating beneath him. Behind him came his brothers of the Ultramarines, each carrying the weight of battle but showing no sign of weariness. The mortal serfs bowed their heads as the giants passed, their eyes lowered in reverence. They hurried forward with mech lifts to collect spent bolter magazines, cracked armor plates, and weapons in need of reloading. Servitors, half man, half machine, clattered on heavy treads, hauling racks of chain swords and storm bolters. From the far side of the hangar came a sharp metallic rhythm, the sound of hydraulics and pistons. A group of tech priests approached, their bodies more metal than flesh, mechadendrites curling like restless serpents above their hunched forms. Their voices rose in binaric chants, streams of machine language prayers offered to the spirits of the ship and weapons. Above them all, a single figure in crimson armor descended from a command dais. His steps were heavy, purposeful, the red of his armor gleaming in the light of the hangar's lumen globes. Where the Ultramarines wore their chapter's proud cobalt blue and gold, his plate was unbroken scarlet, marked with the cog and skull sigil of Mars. The tech marine bowed his head slightly. His voice, distorted by Vox Grill, was steady and resonant. Welcome back, my captain. Gaius inclined his head in return. Thanks to you, my brother. The tech marine gave no smile, no outward show of relief. Instead, he returned to his work, mechadendrites snapping out to direct the loading crews and repair teams. Already, fresh crates of bolter shells and melta bombs were being rolled forward for the Astartes to reclaim. Gaius turned, his voice carrying like a hammer strike through the Vox channel of his warriors. We prepare for Helliser 4. The Forge world must be freed. Arm yourselves. Resupply. There will be no delay. The Space Marines gave no cry in answer. They simply moved, silent, efficient, absolute. Each warrior strode to the racks, reclaiming fresh magazines, checking chain blades, inspecting power packs. Serfs rushed between them, lifting heavy crates with straining arms, guided by curt nods from the giants they served. Sparks flew as armor cracks were sealed with portable welders, incense smoke drifting as tech priests anointed every weapon with oil and prayer. The hangar had become a forge of war. It was Tony who broke the silence in the multiversal group chat, his words appearing across their shared interface. Tony, hold up, you guys just blew up a planet-killer ship, and now you're going straight to another war? No nap, no sandwich break, nothing. Naruto's reply came quickly, almost in disbelief. Naruto, these guys are insane. They don't even rest. Just fight, fight, fight. Saeko typed calmly, though her thoughts were more uneasy. Saeko, don't they need rest? Mindy added her line a moment later, her words short but honest. Mindy, I'd have collapsed by now. From those close calls from death that she just watched. The chat fell quiet again, the group almost overwhelmed as they watched the Astartes move like an unbroken machine. Near the Thunderhawk, the young serf who had flown them out stood stiffly at attention. His tunic was stained with oil, his hands trembling slightly as he saluted in the Roman style, right fist to chest, head bowed. Gaius approached him. His shadow fell across the youth. What is your name? The serf swallowed, voice cracking with both pride and fear. Marcus Vitus, my lord. Gaius gave a single nod. Then, Serf Marcus, you will remain as Thunderhawk pilot. You will carry us into battle and return us home. See to it that your craft is always ready. The youth's eyes widened, his breath catching as though he had just been knighted. He saluted again, more firmly this time. I will not fail you, my lord. Good, Gaius answered simply, and moved on. He turned to the tech priests. Ready the drop pods. Binary prayers hissed and clicked in response. The machine priests scuttled toward the looming pods, their mechadendrites sparking as they checked clamps, retro thrusters, and guidance systems. The hangar filled with the clatter of chains as servitors hauled the pods into position. The sound of rites and engines mingled, half prayer, half machine test. Mechadendrites are flexible, metal tendrils grafted into the body of a tech marine or member of the Adeptus Mechanicus. They act like extra limbs, able to hold tools, weapons, or even perform delicate tasks like welding or surgery. Some are tipped with claws, drills, or data spikes that can plug directly into machines. Gaius stood in silence, watching, while his brothers finished their preparations around him. Tony couldn't help himself. His words appeared in the chat again. Tony, okay, gotta ask. Those red-robed guys with all the wires? They look just like the freaks you just fought. What's the deal? You actually trust them? This time, Gaius chose to answer in text, his thoughts transmitted directly. Gaius, they are tech priests of Mars. They replace their flesh with machine not for vanity, but for duty. They are priest, mechanic, and engineer in one. Their creed demands they serve the machine god. They maintain the ships, weapons, and armor of the Imperium. Without them, even we would falter. Tony whistled in reply. Tony, so they cut off perfectly good arms and legs just to swap them for metal? That's, wow. I thought I was obsessed with tech, but that's extreme. It was Saeko who noticed next. Saeko, but why does that one Astartes wear red armor? He's Ultramarine, is he not? Shouldn't he be blue and gold like the rest? Gaius answered without hesitation. Gaius, he is still Ultramarine. But Tech Marines serve two masters, their chapter, and Mars. When one is chosen for that path, he is sent to the forge world of Mars itself, to study the mysteries of the machine god. They are trained by the tech priests, sworn into their order. When they return, they bear the red armor of Mars to show their dual allegiance. The blue of the chapter is replaced, for they are half Ultramarine, half Mechanicus. Naruto's eyes widened as he read. Naruto, so he's like a ninja trained by two different village. Mindy, except one of those villages made of robot cultists. Tony chuckled in the feed. Tony, figures. Even in a galaxy this grim, brand loyalty still matters. Red for the machine god. Blue for the home team. Got it. The preparations neared completion. Bolters were reloaded, chain swords oiled, melta bombs checked. The red-armored tech marine gave final approval to the pods, his vox grill hissing binary cant. One by one, the space marines took their places beside their weapons, waiting for the signal, and now two space marines are carrying flamer. The hangar was filled with the noise of engines, prayers, and the steady movements of men and machine, but at the center of it all, Gaius sat in silence, motionless as a statue. The others in the chat felt it too, that stillness before the storm. Naruto finally typed, quieter this time. Naruto, they really don't rest. The rest of the members were silent. The drop pods loomed, waiting. Soon they would fall to Helisar 4. And the Ultramarines, as ever, would follow their captain. Chapter 24 Descent of Fire. The launch bays of the Oath of Rectitude thundered with sound and ritual. Hydraulic clamps locked, servitors chanted binary hymns, and the tech marines anointed machinery with blessed oils that smelled of iron and incense. Towering drop pods hung suspended, their armored shells dark and heavy, each one capable of carrying death from orbit to the ground below. Gaius stood among them, helm under his arm, watching as his warriors took their places. 12 space marines stepped into their pods without hesitation. Harness seats of adamantium clamped shut across their armor, locking them down with a hiss of pneumatics. Thick restraints crossed their chests, shoulders, and legs. Even Astartes needed the bindings. The shock of entry, the crushing force of impact, without the harnesses and gravitic dampers beneath each seat, even genetically engineered warriors would be broken. The central cogitators hummed at the core of each pod. Machine spirits rested inside armored housings, their spirits placated with fresh litanies. They would guide the descent, fire the thrusters, and decide the moment when the armored pedals burst open to unleash their passengers. A tech marine's voice cut across the deck. The Omniscia watches. Machine spirits blessed. Gyros aligned. Retro thrusters readied. His servo arm swept a sensor across the pod, smoke curling around its casing. Each word was both report and prayer. Gaius stepped toward his own pod, a single-seat command variant, smaller but fitted with additional vox and tactical links. The clamps of his harness locked into place, pressure seals hissing around him. He let the restraints take his weight and opened a vox channel. He didn't bring his vehicle in the pod, as it won't be any of use for now. On my mark, he said calmly. His warrior's icons blinked green on his visor display. 2. 1. Go. The clamps released. The pods hurled forward, launched from magnetic rails with the force of giant cannons. The ship's gravity cut out in the instant of release. For a heartbeat, there was silence. Then came the fall. Through the small view slit, the world of Helisar 4 grew vast and burning. The pods streaked downward, wrapped in fire, their armored hulls glowing orange against the black of space. While the chat members chatted, outside the pod also being pulled by Gaius, to the planet at high speed. Tony, this is quite dizzying. Naruto, they're on fire. They're literally on fire. Mindy, they're like inside or a meteorite falling down the planet. Saeko, terrifying. Gaius ignored them. His focus narrowed to the descent. His body pressed hard against the harness as the pod screamed through atmosphere. The last second stretched out. Warning runes flared crimson. The pod shuddered. Retro thrusters fired with a roar, slamming against gravity and slowing the descent from meteor speed to survivable. The impact came like a thunderclap. The pod buried itself into ground already scarred with slag and wreckage. Dust and fire erupted outward. Inside, Gaius' bones rattled within his reinforced frame, but he endured. The restraints released. Warning sigils turned green. Hydraulics blew. The pod's armored pedals crashed outward, smoke and heat rushing in. The angels of death stepped into war. Meanwhile the squad drop pod landed first, and are already fighting. The 12 marines poured from their pods with the precision of someone who have done this hundreds of times. Bolters rose in unison. A line of fire spat outward, explosive rounds cutting into the first enemy ranks that dared approach. The defenders were already there, skittery-eye, twisted remnants of the forge's once loyal protectors. Their augmatics were scarred with crude sigils of chaos, their precision movements turned jerky and brutal. They advanced with dead eyes and raised weapons, fighting under the Iron Warrior's yoke. Lost gun lanced through the smoke. Bolter shells answered, each shot blasting apart metal and flesh. A flamer roared, bathing a cluster of enemies in cleansing fire. Their screams echoed across the landing site. A second pod hit the ground close by. Its ramp crashed open, and Gaius strode out into battle. His sword hummed in his hand, its edge glowing faintly, while his bolter barked in controlled bursts. His warriors closed formation around him, their discipline turning chaos into a firing line of iron resolve. The corrupted Skitarii fell back step by step, dragged into cover behind wrecked machinery and half-collapsed walls. Gaius marked their retreat but pressed forward, knowing they would only regroup. The Oath of Rectitude fed him location data across his visor display. They had landed within striking distance of the manufactorums, the sprawling heart of the forges where the Iron Warriors had entrenched themselves. The chat blinked again. Tony, if you've got orbital pods, why not just slam them right into the enemy's base? Save the walk. Gaius answered through the chat, so only the chat members can see it. Because the Iron Warriors built those defenses. The manufactorums bristle with hidden turrets, void-shielded bastions, and enough guns to cut even us from the sky. Better to strike close, carve a path, and bleed their strength. There was no reply. Even Tony could see the truth in that. As the Marines advanced beyond the landing zone, they began to see the full cost of the enemy's occupation. Helisar's people were everywhere, slaves driven in chains, beaten by overseers in spiked armor. Shock prods cracked against their backs. Collars with glowing runes forced them to march in step, pulling carts of scrap and ammunition. Some had been augmented crudely, their arms replaced with heavy lifters or saws, their bodies turned into tools until they collapsed. Overseers executed the weak without pause, letting corpses lie in the dust as warnings. When the slaves saw the Marines, they froze. Tools clattered from their hands. For a long moment, none dared move. Then one fell to his knees, hands trembling as he raised them to his chest. Fingers crossed into the shape of the Aquila, the imperial double-headed eagle. His voice cracked as he whispered, "Angels! Angels of death!" The words spread like fire. Dozens followed. Some wept openly, making the Aquila with broken hands, their chains rattling. A chorus of hoarse voices rose up, half prayer, half sob. The Emperor's angels, salvation, deliverance. Behind his visor, Gaius' expression did not change. But his warriors stood taller, bolters raised, as though the people's faith itself hardened their resolve. For once, the multiversal group said nothing. Even Tony kept quiet, watching above Gaius, as starving men and women begged for deliverance in the shadow of the angels of death. And now we're wondering who truly is the Emperor. The moment ended with the bark of enemy guns. Overseers pushed the slaves aside, Skitarii ranks forming again. More came, augmented slaves with weapons grafted crudely to their bodies, driven forward as expendable shock troops. Bolters answered, cutting them down. Gaius led his warriors step by step, pressing forward toward the distant manufactorums. Chapter 25 The Anvil of Flesh. The march into the city was slow, each step crunching over ash and broken glass. Ahead of the Ultramarines, the ruins of hab blocks stretched like a graveyard of stone and steel. Once, people had lived here, families, workers, children. Now, only smoke and silence remained, broken by the sound of chains and the shuffle of countless feet. They appeared in the haze first as shadows, then as forms of flesh and metal. Men, women, even children, shackled together in work gangs. Their faces were hollow, skin stretched over bone, eyes wide with fear or dulled by exhaustion. Crude augmetics were bolted onto their bodies, arms ending in drills, claws, or saw blades, wired into muscles that twitched under the weight of pain and obedience. Overseers walked among them, striking with shock staves when they slowed. The chat went silent for a moment. Above Gaius, they could see everything too clearly. Mindy pressed her hand to her mouth. "Oh my God, are those kids?" Tony muttered, voice low and shaken. "I've seen war zones, refugee camps, but this is something else. They're turning people into machines." Tony thinking, "Gaius, your world is truly a hellhole." Naruto's fists clenched at his sides, his usual energy replaced by a deep, angry glare. "They are controlling innocent people to fight for them, cowardly bastards." Saeko remained quiet. She did not flinch, but her knuckles whitened from clenching her hand. She had seen cruelty before, but there was something different here, a coldness that stripped away all humanity. The overseers gave their order, and the slaves charged. "Hold your fire," Gaius commanded, his voice steady through the vox. "Ammunition is not for them. Blades only." His warriors obeyed without hesitation. Bolters clicked back onto maglocks, chain swords roared to life, and power blades hummed with a low, threatening song. The Ultramarines advanced as one, their line unbreakable. The first wave of slave soldiers struck like a tide. They screamed, voices raw with pain, swinging claws and rusted tools, throwing themselves forward with no thought of survival. Gaius met them head-on. His power sword cut a wide arc, its energy field flaring as it sliced through augmetic limbs and armored torsos. Beside him, a chain sword tore three enemies apart in a single strike, blood and oil spraying across the broken street. Another Marine brought his armored fist down like a hammer, crushing a slave's skull into the ground. The line held. The Ultramarines moved forward step by step, each motion precise and practiced. "This." Tony's voice was tight, almost hollow. "This isn't a battle. It's a meat grinder." Naruto's voice shook with anger. Their people. They were forced into this. How can anyone do this to them? They don't stop, Mindy whispered. Her eyes were wide, reflecting every brutal motion. They just keep coming, even when they know they're going to die. Saeko spoke at last, her tone quiet but clear. They may have been controlled, and they were clearly experimented on. With Saeko seeing those metal augment on children's and many people. Wave after wave threw themselves at the Ultramarines, and still the line held. Bodies piled high, broken machines twitched in the dust, and the stench of blood mixed with smoke and oil. But the enemy did not slow. Gaius realized the truth. They were meant to delay. Every moment wasted here was another moment the iron warriors inside the manufactorums prepared their defenses. With a gesture, he signaled his squad forward. Ignore the masses. Break through. The Marines surged ahead, forcing their way past the endless tide. They did not fight every foe now, only those in their path. Bolters roared back to life, each shot clean and measured, blasting apart overseers or tearing open crude heavy weapons. Then the city itself seemed to answer. Loudspeakers hidden in the walls and towers crackled to life, their static echoing across the ruined streets. A voice rolled out, deep and cold, filled with grim confidence. Ultramarine, it boomed. This world is no longer the Imperium's. It is mine. Its people mortar, its cities stone, its skies fire. And you? The voice paused, deliberate. Are you Gaius? The Gaius? The blade of the Primarch? Ha! Then hear me. I am Baldaran, warsmith of the Iron Warriors, master of this fortress, and will be the architect of your grave. The chat erupted in shock. Blade of the Primarch. Tony said quickly. Wait, is that a title of yours, Gaius? Naruto nearly shouted, Gaius is famous. Like, that famous. Mindy's eyes darted toward Gaius in the feed. He just called you out by name. Saiko's voice was quiet but certain. He knows who you are. That makes him dangerous. Gaius did not flinch. His voice was calm, his tone almost bored as he answered into the vox. I have never heard of you. He raised his bolter and fired once. The nearest loudspeaker exploded in sparks and smoke. The voice cut off, leaving only silence and the sound of battle. With a gesture, Gaius ordered his marines forward at full speed. Their formation shifted, long strides eating the ground as bolters barked in short, brutal bursts. The chat was dragged along with the motion, their vision jolting with every heavy step. Mindy still dodged instinctively as bullets cracked overhead, even though she knew they couldn't touch her. As she already experienced many times. Tony muttered, as he watched the change in scenery. Ugh, this is like motion sickness, but worse. You've got to warn me before sprinting like that again, big guy. Naruto leaned forward, yelling encouragement like he was right there on the battlefield. Go, Gaius. Push through. Don't let them stop you. Saeko kept her silence. But her eyes were sharp, focused, as though she shared in the rhythm of the battle. The manufactorum loomed ahead. Its gates were massive, taller than any hab block, reinforced with steel and ceramite. Anti-air guns thundered from its battlements, firing into the skies, and within its walls, the Iron Warriors waited. The Ultramarines did not slow. Their bolters roared, their blades flashed, and the distance to the fortress shrank with every stride. Behind them, the city burned. Ahead of them, the Iron Warriors watched. And above it all, the chat could only hold their breath, pulled deeper into a world that felt more real, and more horrifying, than anything they had ever known. Chapter 26 The Iron Maw. The gates of the manufactorum loomed above them like the walls of a fortress. Towering slabs of ceramite and steel, reinforced with iron studs and layered plating, they were meant to hold back entire armies. Siege guns might have taken hours to crack them. But Gaius did not bring guns. He brought his blade. The captain stepped forward, his blue and gold armor shining in the haze. He raised his power sword, its edge glowing with a fierce, humming light. Then, without a word, he brought it down in a single, sweeping strike. The blade cut through metal as though it were parchment. Sparks sprayed in every direction, molten steel dripping and hissing as the sword burned its way through. Gaius carved a wide, arcing wound across the gate, then slashed again, his movements steady, deliberate. The massive door groaned under the strain before splitting apart, falling inward with a crash that shook the ground. Firelight bled from the edges, and smoke rolled out in heavy waves. The path into the manufactorum was open. Forward, Gaius ordered, his voice calm through the vox. The Ultramarines advanced without hesitation, stepping over the ruined gate into darkness. The manufactorum seemed to breathe around them. Lights flickered on across the walls, shadows twisting as gears and hydraulics hissed to life. Then came the sound of clattering chains and grinding metal. Gun servitors woke. They were everywhere, slaved into the walls, ceilings, even the floor beneath the Marines' boots. Once human torsos fused into the manufactorum itself, their heads twitching, dead eyes staring blankly as heavy bolters and plasma cannons locked into firing position. A heartbeat later, the entire corridor lit up with muzzle flashes. Streams of fire screamed toward the squad, cutting sparks into the steel floor. "Spread formation!" Gaius commanded. The Ultramarines obeyed instantly, moving apart in a precise pattern. Bolters roared in answer, each shot tearing apart a servitor's weapon mount or blasting its ruined body into silence. Chain swords revved as the first wave of Skitarii stepped out from the smoke, their glowing optics scanning, rifles raised with machine precision. The two forces clashed in the doorway of the manufactorum, a storm of fire and steel. One Ultramarine smashed through a Skitarius, his power fist crushing metal bones. Another swept his chainsword across three servitors, sparks and gore spraying the walls. Gaius himself cut a path through the thickest gun line, every swing of his sword splitting armored torsos and severing weapon mounts. The squad pushed forward, unyielding, their formation never breaking. Above, the chat members were silent at first, the sheer volume of the battle leaving them stunned. Tony spoke first, his voice tense. Those things in the walls. They're people. Or they were. Mindy swallowed hard, her hands tied around her knees. They're using bodies as turrets. That's... I don't even... Naruto's teeth clenched. Damn bastards. Saeko stayed quiet, her sharp eyes following every detail. But her pale knuckles showed what she thought. The squad pressed deeper into the manufactorum. The air grew hotter, filled with the stink of oil and burning flesh. Conveyor belts rattled overhead, carrying half-finished weapons and machine parts into the shadows above. Pipes hissed steam, casting the halls in a constant fog. It was in these cramped, twisting corridors that the Iron Warrior's cruelty revealed itself. Grenades wired to door frames. Pressure plates hidden under floor panels. Melta-charges set to blow entire walls. Chemical vents ready to drown intruders in choking gas. Every turn was another trap waiting to spring. One Primaris Marine, younger and eager, nearly stepped onto a plate concealed beneath a patch of grime. At the last moment, a veteran reached out and pulled him back. A second later, the trap exploded harmlessly in front of them, a cluster of grenades tearing the floor apart with thunderous force. The young Marine exhaled, his voice low but clear through the vox. "Thank you, brother." The veteran's reply was short, almost dismissive. "Watch your steps. You will not always have me." But the lesson was learned. The younger Marine stayed closer in formation, more careful now. Then came the voices. At first, just static, a hiss from the manufactorum's hidden speakers. Then screams. High, terrible, human screams. Men, women, and children crying out, calling for mercy, begging for death. The walls themselves seemed to cry. The squad kept moving, their steps never slowing. But above, the chat members could hear every word. Mindy flinched. "Oh my god, those are people." Tony grimaced, eyes narrowing. "This is psychological warfare. They want you rattled. They want you running into traps." Naruto shook his head, his fists trembling. "I don't care what they want. People are dying. Gaius, you have to move faster." Saiko's voice was quiet, almost pained. "It's cruel. They want to break your mind before your body." The screams didn't stop. They grew louder. Louder still, mixed now with the crack of whips, the sobs of children, the laughter of tormentors. And then came the words. The speakers boomed to life, deep and cold. "Ultramarine," the voice said. "Every moment you waste, another life is lost. Another soul broken. Come faster, Angel of the Corpse Emperor, or their blood will stain your honor." The voice chuckled, low and cruel. "Or perhaps that is what you want. To watch. To hear. To remember their screams as the last sound in this world." Tony froze on the spot. Corpse Emperor? Wait, hold on. Their emperor's dead. Mindy covered her ears, trying to block the sound. Make it stop, please. Naruto all but shouted, anger and grief burning in his voice. Then go faster. Don't just walk, run. But the Ultramarines didn't run. They didn't panic. They slowed. Their formation tightened, every angle covered. They moved more carefully, not less, their discipline absolute. Naruto's shout echoed in the silence, carried on the feed. Gaius turned his head slightly, his eyes narrowing beneath his helm. He didn't say a word, he didn't need to. The weight of his gaze alone pressed down like a mountain. Naruto froze, his voice faltering. He wanted to shout again, but the look stopped him. It wasn't anger. It was something heavier. Something colder. The weight of a man who had seen this before, too many times. Naruto swallowed hard, his fists trembling at his sides. Why aren't you?" he started. Tony cut in quickly, grabbing Naruto's shoulder. "Because that's the trap, kid. They want him to run. To make mistakes. To rush into something worse. If they move faster, more people die. You get it now?" Naruto's breath caught. Slowly, he nodded. "I see." He lowered his head. "Sorry." But Gaius said nothing. He only turned forward again, leading the squad deeper into the manufactorum. The further they went, the worse it became. Every wall hid a weapon. Every corridor reeked of blood and smoke. The air itself seemed poisoned, each breath thick with ash. The servitors came in waves, bolted into the ground, the walls, the ceilings, their bodies more machine than human, their minds long dead. Skitarii fought with machine precision, rifles crackling, cybernetic limbs whirring as they aimed without hesitation. Augmented slaves hurled themselves forward like fodder, their broken bodies collapsing one after another. But the Ultramarines kept their pace. Methodical. Cold. Unstoppable. For every trap, there was a watchful eye. For every ambush, there was a bolter waiting. For every slave forced into battle, there was a blade that ended their suffering. And through it all, the chat members could only watch, helpless in their distant world. Chapter 27 The Beast in Chains. Warsmith Bald Aaron stood at the heart of his manufactorum, staring at the monitor showing Gaius and Ultramarines getting closer. Dust drifted from the ceiling. Chains rattled where they hung from gantries overhead. He clenched his gauntlet fist, the servos whining against the strain. He had thrown everything into their path, servitors bound to the walls, Skitarii programmed to fight to the last, traps woven into every corridor. Grenades wired to plates, gas vents hidden beneath floors, melta-charges strung to entire walls and psychological torture, though the last one he thinks has little effects but still does at least to try slow them down. But his traps had killed none, it only made them more careful. It wasn't enough. Never enough. He spat on the floor, the taste of ash and metal thick on his tongue. Damn you, Ultramarines, damn you all. There was a time when he commanded thousands. Iron warriors had marched at his side, their formations unbreakable, their guns carving cities into dust. But that was long ago, before Vent Mr. The memory clawed at him even now. The fortress of Vent Mr, the daemon world of Midrengard, his failure burned across the warp itself. He had miscalculated, underestimated the foe, and the fortress fell. His brothers branded him weak, unworthy, a shame upon Perturabo's name. His command stripped, his rank shattered, his honor spat upon, Bald Aaron was cast out. Exile. No chains, no cell, only the slow death of watching everything he had built crumble away. He had wandered the Eye of Terror with what remained of his company, their numbers dwindling raid by raid. From thousands, to hundreds, to less than 100 now. 100 iron warriors clinging to the scraps of his command. No. Not even 100. His jaw tightened. He had left 20 aboard the ship above this world, guarding his orbital support, holding the line while his forge work below was completed. But the Ultramarines had come down on them like wolves. In a single strike, those bastards destroyed the ship and everyone aboard. Not one survivor. Bald Aaron muttered. He felt his teeth grind. You'll pay for that, sons of Gil-Iman. By iron and blood, you'll pay. Now he had only 80 iron warriors left within these walls, stretched thin across the manufactorums, and he is now calling them to concentrate at the core area, enough to match the Ultramarines head-on, even kill them, but he was not sure of doing that without casualties. That was why he had relied on traps and machines, why he hid his warriors until the time was right. Every skirmish, every ambush was meant to bleed the enemy, to slow them, to soften them. But still they came. He had watched the monitor, seen the blue and gold armored figures moving like an unstoppable tide. They advanced at a steady, unhurried pace, slower than he expected, slower than he planned for. At first he thought it was caution. Then he realized the truth. It was discipline. They weren't tired. They weren't strained. Their slow march was rest. Every careful step, every measured advance gave them time to breathe, to regain strength, to keep their formation whole. His traps weren't exhausting them. They were keeping them sharp. Bald Aaron slammed his fist against the console, the metal bending beneath the blow. Cursed sons of Ultramar, you dare mock me with your calm? You dare crawl through my fortress as though it were a training ground. He had planned to finish his work in secret. The Obliterator monstrosities, his true creation, his path to reclaiming power. Flesh and machine fused into living weapons, creatures that could turn the tide of war. He was close. So close. But the Ultramarines had come too soon. He had no time left. If they reached the core, if they breached the last chamber, everything would be lost. His exile would end not in glory, but in shame. Forgotten. Crushed beneath Gilliman's lapdogs. His eyes turned toward the final gate. Behind it, chained in darkness, lay one last weapon. The Hell Brute. A twisted brother entombed in metal, once a proud iron warrior, now a maddened beast bound in sarcophagus and steel. The chains had kept it locked for years, its roars echoing through the halls like thunder. It hated him. It hated everything. But it would kill for him, because that was all it could do. Balderun's lips curled into a grim smile. Yes, you'll have your war, beast. He strode across the chamber, his armor scraping against the floor, and pressed his hand to the rune lock. Massive gates groaned as they opened, gears shrieking in protest. Steam poured out, and with it came the sound of fury. The Hell Brute stood chained to the wall, its frame a nightmare of metal and flesh. Tubes of black ichor ran into its body, feeding organs that should have died millennia ago. One arm ended in a massive power fist, each finger like a piston. The other held a multi-melta, its barrel glowing faint red from constant heat. Its head was a fusion of skull and helm, demonic eyes glaring beneath layers of iron. It roared, a sound like a furnace screaming, straining against the chains that bound it. The walls shook, bolts rattling from the ceiling. Bald Aaron raised his arms wide. Go, my beast! Rip them apart! Drown this place in their blood! The locks disengaged. Chains fell away. The Hell Brute surged forward, roaring in blind fury, smashing through the gates and charging into the manufactorum's corridors with thunderous steps. Gaius felt it before he heard it. A deep rumble, like the growl of the earth itself. Then the roar came, shaking the very walls of the manufactorum, a sound so raw and filled with hate that even his battle-hardened brothers paused for a heartbeat. He raised his voice through the vox, sharp and clear. Hell Brute! The squad moved instantly, dispersing into firing positions. Bolters came up, melta bombs primed, eyes sweeping the shadows. Then the beast came. The Hell Brute came into view, a walking abomination of steel and tortured flesh. Its plating was the dull grey of forged iron, scarred by centuries of battle, with jagged chevrons of yellow and black striping its warped carapace like a cruel parody of hazard markings. Hydraulic pistons hissed as its massive claw flexed, each finger thick enough to crush ceramite, while a multi-melta jutted from its other arm, glowing with searing heat. Beneath the armored sarcophagus, the twisted face of a once proud iron warrior could still be seen, stretched in an eternal scream that mingled fury with agony. It was not merely a war engine, it was a siege given form, a relentless monster that embodied the Iron Warrior's pitiless creed. It smashed through the manufactorum's walls in a storm of sparks and steel, molten fragments flying as it burst into the corridor. Its multi-melta blazed, a beam of searing heat tearing across the floor, liquefying steel where moments before a marine had stood. Its massive power fist swung wide, slamming into a support pillar and shattering it like glass. Tony's mouth went dry. It looked like demon fused with machinery. Seeing a person face with only anger and fury. Mindy's hands flew to her mouth. It doesn't even look alive. It's screaming just to stay awake. Naruto's fists clenched tight, shaking. What the hell is that thing? Getting unsettled by its nightmarish looks. Saiko's eyes stayed fixed on the beast, her voice low. There's no life in that beast's eyes. Only anger and blinding fury. Fire! Gaius commanded. Bolters roared. Dozens of shells hammered into the Hellbrute's frame, sparking off armor, tearing into exposed flesh. It staggered but did not fall. Instead, it roared louder, charging forward. One Marine leapt aside a moment too late. The Hellbrute's fist caught him mid-step, crushing him with a sickening crack before hurling the broken body into the wall. His armor shattered, blood smearing the steel. "Brother down!" Another shouted, already moving. He knelt by the fallen Marine, hands steady as he retrieved the gene seed from the broken body. No hesitation. No wasted motion. Within moments, he was back in formation, bolter raised once more. They lost a person now. Mendy's voice was low, tight. Naruto's fists trembled, voice cracking as he shouted, That wasn't right. Nobody deserves to die like that. Especially when he knew that they were the good guys. Tony let out a slow breath, his tone clipped. Nobody indeed deserves to die like that. But that's what they're fighting for, to save this planet. There will be someone who will fall. Saeko's eyes followed the squad, steady but faintly unsettled. They didn't even faltered when one of their died. The squad did not falter. Left flank, melt bombs. Gaius ordered. 2 Marines surged forward under covering fire, their bolters spitting death. One hurled a melt-a-bomb, the charge magnetizing to the Hellbrute's leg. The explosion tore through armor, blowing half the limb apart. The beast stumbled, roaring in fury, dragging itself forward on one good leg and one ruined stump of flesh and steel. Gaius moved then. He charged, power sword blazing. The Hellbrute swung at him, the power fist crashing down. Gaius rolled aside, the floor shattering where he had stood. He rose, slashing once, twice, his sword carving deep lines into the daemon flesh, cutting through the cables that fed its strength. The Hellbrute roared again, blind with fury, its multi-melta swinging toward him. Heat flared. Gaius leapt, the beam searing past him, melting the wall into liquid iron. He landed atop the beast's ruined frame, boots digging into twisted armor. With a roar of his own, Gaius drove his power sword down, straight into the sarcophagus core. The blade pierced metal and bone alike, cutting through the prison where the Iron Warrior still lingered. The Hellbrute convulsed, flailing wildly, smashing itself against the walls. Demonic essence screamed, a howl that rattled every chamber. Then, with one final shudder, it collapsed, the light in its eyes burning out as black smoke poured from its wounds. Silence fell. The Ultramarines regrouped. One by one, they stepped to their fallen brother. Briefly, they bowed their heads, a moment of respect in the middle of war. The gene seed secured, his sacrifice noted, they turned their eyes forward once more. Gaius stood over the smoldering corpse of the Hellbrute, his blade still glowing with heat. He said nothing. But in his silence was a vow, a promise carved in iron. This loss would be answered. In the Emperor's name, Bald Aaron would fall. The squad tightened formation, their boots striking the floor in steady rhythm as they advanced deeper into the manufactorum, toward the Warsmith's final bastion. Chapter 28 The Fall of Warsmith Bald Aaron. The manufactorum shook with the dull echo of distant detonations. Dust sifted down from the high gantries, settling over the broken halls like a pale fog. The air was thick with the tang of burning promethium and scorched steel. Somewhere deep in the fortress, Balduran's warriors regrouped, their heavy boots pounding like drums on the metal floors. But they were already too late. Captain Gaius of the Ultramarine stood at the head of his brothers, his armor scorched but unyielding, his power sword mag-locked to his thigh, bolter steady in his hands. His visor swept over the chamber gates ahead, thick adamant and reinforced with layers of Iron Warrior's craftsmanship. Any frontal assault would bleed them dry. He knew Bald Aaron was counting on it. Plant charges, Gaius ordered, voice calm over the vox. Without hesitation, his squad split into pairs, moving with silent efficiency. Melt-a-bombs were placed at weak points in the surrounding structure, not the gate itself. Pipes, supports, and reinforcing struts, all marked and primed. Minutes later, explosions rolled like thunder. Walls buckled, floors split, and entire sections of the fortress groaned as breaches opened in unexpected places. The Iron Warriors had prepared kill zones at the gates, but no enemy came. Instead, Ultramarines poured through new wounds in the manufactorum's skin, firing from angles the defenders had not foreseen. The once united 80 Iron Warriors were scattered, dragged into smaller firefights where they could no longer bring their full strength to bear. From above, Tony let out a low whistle. That's clever. He's not walking into Balderun's trap, he's tearing it apart. Naruto grinned, leaning forward. Had outsmarted them. That's what I'm talking about. Bolter fire shook the halls. The Ultramarines advanced in perfect lines, each step measured, each burst of fire precise. Frag grenades bounced across the floor, detonating in sharp flashes that drove traitors from cover. Those who broke from their barricades were cut down in disciplined volleys. The Iron Warriors, once feared for their relentless sieges, were forced to fight piecemeal. Their furious charges found only steel walls of bolter fire. In one barricaded hall, traitors fired from behind rusted plates of steel welded into crude bulwarks. The Ultramarines did not storm the defenses. Two stepped forward with flamers, unleashing roaring torrents of fire. Promethium washed over the barricades, flushing the Iron Warriors out in panicked screams. They stumbled into the open, where disciplined bolters cut them down before they could even raise their weapons. The squad moved on. No cheers. No wasted words. Naruto frowned, jaw tight. That's rough. But I guess there's no other way, hey. The fortress groaned as more melta charges detonated. Corridors collapsed behind retreating traitors, cutting them off from their brothers. What had once been a unified force of 80 now fought in broken knots of 10 or less. Trapped in dead ends, they were turned into targets. Grenades thundered. Flamers roared. Every pocket of resistance was erased. Tony spoke again, voice quieter this time. That's not just force. That's experienced. They've fought sieges like this 100 times. Mindy hugged her arms to her chest. And they don't hesitate. Not even once. Close quarters came soon after. In the choking smoke of the manufactorum's ruined halls, Ultramarines met Iron Warriors face to face. Chain swords screamed as they bit into ceramite, bolter pistols flared at point-blank range. But even here, where rage and brute strength might have overwhelmed lesser men, the Ultramarines did not break formation. They fought in pairs. One parried while the other struck, one fired while the other advanced. No Marine stood alone. The Iron Warriors, driven by fury, were cut down one by one in the cold precision of brotherhood. Naruto clenched his fists as he watched. That's it. Watch each other's backs. Don't let them take you down. Though he shouted, only the other members of the chat can hear it and Gaius. By the time the Ultramarines pressed deeper into the manufactorum's core, the Iron Warriors were broken. From Balderun's 80, fewer than 20 remained, clustered in desperation near the central forge. They fought with the madness of cornered beasts, but there was no hope left. Flamers lit the chamber in pillars of fire, grenades bursting overhead, bolters hammering like a storm. One by one, the traitors fell, until silence swallowed the forge. The last gun fell quiet. Smoke drifted. The Ultramarines stood among the dead. Only Balderon remained. The doors to the central chamber groaned open. Warsmith Balderon stood in the heart of his forge, towering amidst machinery and burning furnaces. His armor was blackened iron, striped with hazard yellow, a chain fist whirring on one arm and a combi bolter glowing with heat on the other. The light of the forge fires painted his form in hellish colors, his presence a storm of fury and hate. You think you've won, son of Gilliman? Balderun's voice boomed, distorted through vox grills. I am iron. I am unbroken. I am Perturabos will made flesh. Gaius stepped forward. His bolter lowered, mag locked to his side. Slowly, he drew his power sword, its edge sparking with caged lightning. You are a heretic, he said, voice steady. An heretic meets the Emperor's wrath. The warsmith roared and charged. The chamber exploded into violence. Balderun's chain fist cleaved through a steel column, sparks showering as the pillar collapsed. His blows came like thunder, each one strong enough to smash tanks to ruin. Gaius met him not with brute force, but with discipline. He sidestepped the first strike, his blade flashing, scoring deep cuts along Balderun's chest plate. Sparks danced from the wound. The warsmith bellowed and swung again, forcing Gaius back step by step. Each strike rattled the floor, the sound of grinding servos and tearing steel filling the chamber. Balderon fought with raw rage, but Gaius did not falter. His movements were precise, controlled, each step taken with purpose. Naruto's voice rang out, raw and loud, "Come on, Gaius. Don't back down. You've got this. Bald Aaron lunged, chain fist slamming down. Gaius shifted aside, the blow shattering the floor where he had stood. He struck again, his sword biting through the hazard-striped armor, deeper this time, cutting into the flesh beneath. The warsmith roared, staggering, but still he pressed on. His combi bolter blazed, bolts slamming into the walls. His chain fist carved a wide arc, catching only air as Gaius turned, calm even under the storm. Then came the moment. Bald Aaron swung wide, his chain fist burying itself in a pillar of machinery, lodged deep. The warsmith struggled to wrench it free. Gaius did not hesitate. He surged forward, power sword thrusting straight into the exposed gap in Balderun's chest. The blade pierced ceramite, flesh, and bone, its crackling edge bursting through the warsmith's back. Balderun's roar broke into a choked gasp. His eyes widened, disbelief flickering in them. Impossible. I am iron. Gaius twisted the blade, his reply calm, final. Iron rusts. Duty does not. The warsmith staggered, then collapsed, crashing to the floor with the weight of a fallen giant. His chain fist stilled, his forge fell silent. The Ultramarines stepped into the chamber one by one, their armor scarred, their weapons smoking. They gathered around their captain, eyes turning to the fallen warsmith. For a moment, none spoke. Then Gaius withdrew his blade, its edge glowing faintly in the dim light. His voice came over the vox, calm and unwavering. The mission for the Helliser 4, Forge World, is now completed. Yet unseen by eyes, the warp shifted. Something vast and cunning reached through the veil, its whispers curling toward Captain Gaius like talons seeking to claim a prize. But before they could touch him, a brilliance unlike any light, flared. Golden light swept across the darkness, unyielding, sovereign. The shadow recoiled, shrieking in silence, scattered like ash before a storm. For in that moment, the giant massive sun's gaze was upon his son as well. Chapter 29 Summons from Terra. The manufactorum was quiet at last. Smoke curled from broken vents and shattered towers, the smell of promethium and scorched metal still heavy in the air. Fires guttered among the ruins, throwing restless shadows across the steel bones of the fortress. Where once the iron warriors had bellowed oaths of defiance, now only silence remained, broken only by the footsteps of the Ultramarines. Captain Gaius stood at the center of the forge hall, his helm tucked beneath one arm, his expression set in grim stillness. His warriors moved without words, carrying out their last duties. One pair dragged the corpses of iron warriors into a growing pyre of shattered machines and bodies. The flames hissed and snapped, casting sparks into the dark. There would be no trophies taken, no reminders left to fester, only ashes. Another pair carried a different burden. Wrapped in a shroud of blue cloth marked with the sigil of the Ultramarines, the body of a fallen battle brother rested across their armored arms. The Marine had fought to the last, blade and bolter in hand, and now would be borne home with the same honor he had shown in battle. No one spoke. Even the chat, hovering above the captain's view like a ghost, kept mostly silent. Only Tony spoke, his gaze fixed on the wrapped corpse. His voice, when it came, was low. They fight like giants, but they die like us. Too easy to forget that. Naruto clenched his fists but held his tongue. For once, the energy in him was tempered by respect. Saeko said nothing, but her eyes lingered on the ritual of fire and silence. Then the sky shook. The roar of engines rolled through the ruined manufactorum as thunderhawks descended from the clouds, their armored wings cutting through ash and smoke. Dust blasted across the chamber floor as one landed in the open space outside, its hull painted in the blue and gold of Ultramarines. The boarding ramp hissed open, and Marcus Vitus stepped down. He was young, still carrying the face of a man not long into his third decade. His robes were dark with oil stains, his flight harness scuffed with long use. Marcus had been raised aboard the Oath of Rectitude, one serf among thousands, but his discipline at the helm of a Thunderhawk had set him apart. Captain Gaius himself had once remarked upon his steady hands in a storm of fire. From that moment, Marcus carried both honor and burden, charged with delivering angels of death into battle, and with the greater task of bringing them safely home. He saluted quickly, head bowed in deference. "Captain! The skies are clear. Extraction is ready." Gaius gave a single nod. "Well done, Serf Marcus." For the young serf, those words alone were worth more than medals. He bowed again, stepping back as the Ultramarines carried their fallen brother aboard. The squad followed in silence. Behind them, the fires rose higher, consuming the last remains of Balderun's fortress. This world still crawled with corrupted Skitarii and mortal thralls, but their mission had never been total purgation. The leadership of the heretic force was destroyed, and the Imperium's fleet would arrive to cleanse what remained. The Ultramarine's task was complete. The Thunderhawk lifted, engines straining against gravity, the broken city shrinking beneath. Through the gun ports, the world stretched out in ruin, manufactorums split open like carcasses, plumes of black smoke reaching into the poisoned skies. No one spoke until the clouds swallowed the land below. "It never looks like a victory," Tony murmured. Mindy hugged her arms, eyes on the shrouded body at the rear of the bay. "No. Just, less loss than the other side." Naruto sat forward, elbows on his knees, his usual grin nowhere in sight. "They gave everything. And still." He trailed off, words failing him. Saeko's gaze was steady, though her voice was quiet. "This is war stripped of illusion. There is no beauty here." The Thunderhawk broke through atmosphere, stars scattering across the void above. Hanging in orbit, vast and solemn, was the Oath of Rectitude. Its armored hull stretched across the starscape, lined with weapon batteries and void shields, a fortress ship of the Ultramarines. The Thunderhawk slid into the hangar bays, massive doors closing like the jaws of steel. As the ramp hissed open, the air filled with the sound of chanting serfs and the hiss of incense. Servitors clanked forward to begin cleansing rites on the gunship's hull. The Ultramarines disembarked. The fallen brother was borne reverently down the ramp, serfs bowing their heads as he passed. Gaius followed, helm now clasped beneath his arm once more, his eyes fixed forward. "Brothers," he said, his voice calm, unyielding. "The mission is complete. Rest now. Tend to wounds, repair your arms. Pray for our fallen. Duty will call us again soon." The Marines saluted, then dispersed, each moving toward their own rituals of repair and remembrance. Gaius had not yet left the hangar when a chapter serf hurried forward, bowing deeply. "Lord Captain," the man said, breath quick with urgency. "You are summoned to the Astropath's sanctum. It may concern new orders." Gaius's brow shifted slightly, the only sign of surprise. "At once," he answered, striding past. The path to the sanctum was narrow, lit by dim lumen strips and lined with sigils of warding. Incense hung thick in the air, meant to muffle the whispers of the warp. The chamber itself was sparse, no banners or gold, only iron walls edged with protective runes. The Astropath waited at the center, veiled and hooded. Her sockets were scarred by the soul binding that had seared away her sight, yet her head turned as if she could see Gaius clearly. Her voice was layered, as though others spoke behind her words. Astropaths were the Imperium's only way to speak across the stars. No machine or radio could cross the endless void of space, but a soul bound to the Emperor could send a thought farther than any ship could travel. The price was terrible. In the ritual of soul binding, most psychers died, and those who survived were left scarred, blind, pale, and haunted by whispers from the warp. To send a message, an astropath forced their mind into the immaterium, shaping words into raw thought. If they were lucky, another astropath light years away would catch the signal and turn it back into speech or scribe it down. If they were unlucky, the message would twist into nonsense, or worse, draw the attention of something hungry in the warp. Fragile as they were, these silent messengers kept the Imperium alive. Without them, its countless worlds would fall into darkness, cut off and alone. She held out a parchment sealed in black wax. "Lord Captain. A message, borne through the warp. For your eyes." Gaius took it, breaking the seal. The words were written in High Gothic, sharp strokes of authority that carried the weight of command. He read in silence. The chat flickered into view over his shoulder, the system automatically translating for them. "Mission discontinued. Captain Gaius is summoned to Terra. By order of Lord Guilliman." For a moment, there was silence. Then Tony let out a low breath. "Wait. Terra? Earth? Then we can finally see, the Earth of universe, Gaius." Naruto gawked. "Hold on, by your, dad, called you. As he keep hearing them Ultramarines, being called by the son of Guilliman." Mindy blinked, awe in her voice. "The Earth of this universe." Saeko's tone was calm. "Doesn't this mean we might see your Earth soon?" Gaius lowered the parchment. His face showed no shock, but his silence carried the weight of thought. He had not set foot on Terra for nearly a century. To be called now, by Guillemon himself, meant the matter was urgent beyond doubt. "The will of the Primarch is law," he said at last, voice steady. "We go to Terra." He left the sanctum without another word, his stride unbroken. The corridors of the Oath of Rectitude vibrated faintly with the hum of plasma engines, the great ship awaiting its course. On the command deck, he found another chapter serf and gave his orders without hesitation. "Relay to the navigator. Set our course for Terra. By the order of Lord Guillemon himself." The serf bowed deeply, already hurrying toward the navigator's sanctum, where the ship's psyker pilot would pierce the veil of the warp and guide them home. Navigators were the Imperium's only hope of crossing the warp. Born of ancient bloodlines and gifted with a third eye that could pierce the madness of the immaterium, they alone could see the light of the Astronomicon and guide a ship toward it. Without their direction, a vessel would be swallowed by storms or lost to demons, never to emerge. Fragile in body but priceless in duty, every navigator carried the lives of thousands in their hands each time a ship made the jump to the warp. Gaius stood alone a moment longer, his eyes fixed on the steel walls around him. His duty was clear, though the path ahead was shrouded. At last, he spoke, his words cutting through the quiet, addressed not only to his crew but to the unseen figures of the chat members. "This campaign is concluded. Another awaits. Our duty carries us onward." And with a gesture, he ended the broadcast. The virtual bodies of the chat members disappeared. If you're enjoying the story, want to read more, and want to support me in creating more, you can check out my Patreon here. Patreon.com/XanderLee. Every bit of support means a lot and helps me keep writing. Chapter 30 The Emperor's Light. The captain's quarters were quiet. The distant thrum of the Oath of Rectitude's engines vibrated faintly through the steel walls, steady as a heartbeat. Captain Gaius sat at a simple desk, helm set aside, a single candle burning before him. Even in a ship built for war, there was space for small silence. The stillness broke when the familiar shimmer of the multiversal chat appeared in the air before him. Names flickered to life, and a ping came through. "At Gaius Maximer Thasser, we want to see Earth." The words came from Tony Stark. Gaius studied the glowing text for a moment before replying. His voice was calm when he spoke into the air. "That may not be possible. Terra is not simply Earth, it is the throne world of the Imperium. The Emperor resides there. If you see it at all, it will be his presence you feel first." The others in the chat stilled, the weight of his words settling over them. Tony typed again, almost hesitating. "I thought your enemies called him a corpse. Doesn't that mean he's dead?" Gaius answered without pause. "His body is broken. That much is true. But his spirit burns still. From the Golden Throne, he sends a light into the warp. That light guides every ship of the Imperium. Without it, travel between the stars would be impossible. Without him, humanity would be lost." The chat hung silent for a long moment. Tony's text came, smaller this time. "So his spirit lives?" "Yes," Gaius replied simply. "And on Terra, his light is strongest. It may be that even the Emperor would sense you." The chat dimmed slowly, its presence fading back into silence. Moments later, the warning bell sounded faintly through the corridors. Gaius left his chamber and walked with heavy steps to the command deck. The great vessel had entered the warp. Beyond the armored hull, reality itself bent and shifted, tides of madness pushing at the ship. The navigator's voice echoed through a speaking horn, strained but steady. "Currents unstable. A storm builds. Adjusting course." On the deck, serfs worked feverishly at control panels, murmuring prayers as runes flared red and gold. The pilot fought to steady the ship against sudden jolts. A serf hurried to Gaius, bowing low. "Lord Captain. The navigator warns, travel time will stretch. Months, perhaps years." Gaius gave only a small nod. He had lived through worse. Even charted routes could turn hostile in the warp. Detours were sometimes survival itself. "So be it. Hold the course," he said. His voice did not waver. The ship groaned, engines roaring against unseen currents, but the Oath of Rectitude pressed onward into the storm. Far away, in a small clearing lit by fireflies, Naruto sat cross-legged, sweat still clinging to him from training. Jiraiya sat across the campfire, sipping from a flask, his white hair glowing faintly in the firelight. Naruto had just finished explaining what he saw through the strange connection, the towering armored warriors, the fire, the silence of death. His words came quick, spilling over each other. And then they carried their brother, all wrapped in blue cloth, and no one said anything. It was. I don't know, pervy sage, it felt heavier than anything I've seen before. Jiraiya's face stayed hard, his brow drawn. If what you saw is real, then their world makes ours look small. Naruto clenched his fists, staring into the fire. Many innocent people were killed, and the enemy used the cries of children to shake Gaius and his brothers. One of them had died in the battle. It didn't feel like a win. Jiraiya was quiet for a long time, only the crackle of fire filling the silence. Finally, he spoke. Listen, brat. Whatever that world is, it's not ours. Your fight's here, your friends, your village. Don't forget that. Naruto looked down, biting his lip. Yeah, but I can't stop thinking about it. Back in Japan, the kendo dojo was empty. Saeko stood alone on the wooden floor, buken in hand. Her father had left for overseas a month ago, leaving her the quiet hall to herself. Her strikes were sharp, echoing in the wide chamber, but her thoughts wandered. She saw again the Ultramarines' endless march, the way they burned their enemies without hesitation, the weight in Captain Gaius's voice. Each strike landed harder than the last. Could her sword matter in such a world? Against monsters in steel, against wars fought across stars? Her buken cracked against the floor, the sound loud in the empty dojo. She breathed hard, lowering her weapon. I'll need to be stronger. Much stronger, she whispered. The night was quiet in New York. Mindy McCready tossed in bed, wide awake. Finally, she slipped out, feet padding softly across the apartment. She stopped outside her father's room and knocked. Daddy, come out first, she whispered. Daemon stirred, grumbling as he sat up. But the seriousness in her voice made him get up without anger. What is it, kiddo? In the living room, she told him everything, about the strange chat, the people she'd met, the giant warrior in blue and gold, the battles she had seen. She mentioned Tony Stark, and Daemon blinked at that. Tony Stark? The Iron Man. He gave a small scoff. You might been too tired, sweetie. As he didn't believe her daughter, thinking she might just be tired from the fight, and needed sleep. Mindy frowned, stubborn. I'm not making it up. I can prove it. She dragged him to her computer and sat him down. Daemon humored her, but there was doubt in his eyes. The chat window shimmered faintly before her eyes, invisible to him. She focused, pulling up the menu and pressing the videos that were stored. A choice appeared, watch or download. She pressed download. Which device? She touched the monitor. The computer whirred to life on its own. Daemon leaned back, startled as a massive file began downloading, storage rapidly filling. What the hell? Mindy didn't answer. She just waited. Within minutes, the screen showed the recording, Gaius, towering in his blue and gold armor, the chat members hovering as she described, and Tony Stark, unmistakable, his face clear. Daemon froze. His mouth opened, then shut again. His hand slowly went to his forehead as he stared at the screen. Mindy watched him nervously. Do you believe me now? Daemon didn't answer right away. His eyes stayed locked on the image, on Tony Stark standing beside something inhuman, impossibly real. Finally, his voice came, hushed. My God! It's real. Mindy let out the breath she'd been holding. She wasn't carrying the secret alone. Now she carries it with her father. Chapter 31. It's about Gaius. The morning in Malibu was quiet. The ocean stretched endlessly outside the glass walls of Stark's home, the surface glittering in the sun. Inside, Tony Stark sat at his dining table with a coffee mug in hand. He wasn't dressed for anything serious, just a worn t-shirt and loose pants. A half-finished blueprint was open on the tablet beside him, but he wasn't really looking at it. For the past week, Agent Coulson had been making his usual trips, checking in on Stark. Always the same questions: what do you know about the armored giant, about Gaius, about this strange connection you've stumbled into? And every time, Tony had sent him away with a sarcastic comment or a half-truth. But today, he decided to play a little differently. The familiar sound of tires crunching on gravel reached him, followed by the faint beep of security confirming the guest. Tony didn't even look up when Coulson walked into the room, calm as always in his neat suit. Mr. Stark, Coulson began in his polite, steady tone. But before he could continue, Tony casually reached over to the table, picked up a small USB drive, and tossed it across the surface. It skidded to a stop just in front of Carlson. "There's your scoop," Tony said, leaning back in his chair with a smirk. "Information on Gaius. Footage. Stuff you've been bothering me for." Carlson blinked, caught off guard. Usually, Stark made him work for scraps of info. He picked up the drive carefully. "What exactly is on this?" "Home movies," Tony replied dryly, sipping his coffee. "Except instead of birthday parties, it's blue giants running like sports cars and breaking everything in their way. Civilians, soldiers, the works. Future humanity at its finest." Carlson's expression stayed unreadable, but his grip on the drive tightened. "You're serious?" "As a heart attack," Tony said smoothly, tapping his chest with mock offense. "Well, used to be, anyway. Point is, you wanted something on Gaius. Now you've got it. Don't say I never give back. P.S. The English idiom as serious as a heart attack simply means extremely serious, not joking at all." For a moment, Carlson simply studied him. Something in Stark's eyes suggested more was going on, but he wasn't in a position to question it. So instead, he nodded. "Thank you. This could be important." Tony waved him off like it was nothing. Yet. Don't mention it. Literally, don't mention it. I don't want fury breathing down my neck any more than usual." Carlson allowed the faintest smile before turning to leave. He tucked the USB carefully into his jacket. Tony watched him go, swirling the coffee in his mug. The front door closed. For a long moment, Stark sat in silence, then chuckled softly to himself. "Let's see what story you spin out of that one, Fury." At S.H.I.E.L.D. headquarters, the mood was anything but calm. The building was buzzing with activity, agents moving in and out of offices, carrying reports, files, and cases. In a high-ceilinged room, Director Nick Fury sat at his desk, a stack of documents spread before him. His one eye was fixed on the pages, but his thoughts were elsewhere. For weeks, he had been investigating whispers of traitors within S.H.I.E.L.D. itself. Leaks, missing intel, operations compromised before they began. He didn't trust anyone fully, not even those closest to him. The strain showed in the lines around his eye. The door opened. Fury looked up sharply. Agent Carlson entered, his expression calm but his pace quick. "What is it, Agent Carlson?" Fury asked, setting the papers aside. Carlson stepped forward and held out the USB. "Sir, it's about Gaius." The moment the name left his lips, Fury's hand froze halfway to the desk. Then, without a word, he took the drive and plugged it into his secured computer. The screen flickered to life. At first, only static. Then the picture cleared. A vast metal corridor filled the frame, flames flickering along the walls. Giants in blue and gold armor thundered forward, their footfalls like rolling drums. Bolter fire spat explosive shells that tore through twisted steel and armored foes alike. The Ultramarines moved with terrifying speed, faster than cars racing down a highway, but every step precise. Fury leaned closer, his jaw tightening. What the hell? The footage shifted. A manufactorum came into view, filled with the clamor of machines. Rows of servitors, half human, half machine, labored endlessly, their faces blank, stripped of wool. Sparks lit the air as they worked. Carlson's brow furrowed. Are those people? The next scene cut to a grim view, civilians huddled under the harsh command of an overseer, a brutal parody of soldiers. Children stood among them, some carrying weapons too large for their arms, others marked with crude augmentations. When Gaius and his squad entered, the civilians dropped to their knees, eyes wide with desperate hope. The blue giants stood silent, unmoving, as if the weight of their presence alone offered protection. Fury said nothing, but his grip on the desk grew tighter. The footage jumped again, close combat this time. Gaius and his warriors clashed with iron warriors in brutal, echoing strikes. Chain swords screamed, power fists shattered steel, and the clash of armor on armor shook the air. The Ultramarines pressed forward without pause, unstoppable, burning everything in their path with cold precision. Then the screen went black. For a long moment, the only sound in the office was the faint hum of the computer. Carlson was the first to speak, his voice low. They're not just soldiers. There's something beyond that. Stronger, faster, more disciplined than anyone on Earth. Fury leaned back slowly in his chair, his one eye still fixed on the dark screen. He let out a long breath, rubbing his temple. Super soldiers. That's what we're looking at. A whole breed of them. Bigger than Rogers, and there's more than one. A lot more. The weight of it settled between them. Neither man moved. Finally, Fury spoke again, his tone quieter, but no less firm. If this is humanity's future, then the game has changed. Everything we're building now, it won't be enough. We'll need to be ready for more than we ever imagined. Coulson nodded once, his face tight. He could still see the image of the civilians kneeling to Gaius and other giants in blue armor, of civilians being forced into chains. The USB drive clicked softly as Fury pulled it out and set it on the desk. He stared at it like it was a piece of the future sitting in his hand. Gaius isn't just a super soldier, Fury said finally. He's a glimpse of what's coming. He thought this was truly the future of humanity. He doesn't know that Gaius was from another universe. Neither of them knew how true, or how false, that really was. Chapter 32 The mission appears. The days inside the warp stretched on like months. In truth, months really had passed since the Oath of Rectitude first left the Forge world. Time in that strange place did not move as it did in the real galaxy. Hours bled into weeks, weeks into months, and the only constant was the steady beat of the ship's engines and the long watch of those aboard. Captain Gaius lived as he always did, in duty, in silence, in readiness. Yet even he was not untouched by the passing of time. Inside his private chamber, he sat at a plain metal table. His helm rested nearby, and for once, he was not eating the tasteless nutrient paste that had carried him through countless campaigns. Instead, before him sat a warm meal, roasted chicken, fresh bread, and vegetables seasoned in a way he had nearly forgotten. The food was from Earth. Not his Earth, but Tony Stark's. The multiversal chat, it was the reward he got from saving Tony Stark. A postal system, allowing members to send each other items. Nothing was forced, a package stayed in holding until the receiver accepted it. When Stark had first asked what Astartes ate, Gaius had explained without shame, nutrient paste, ration bricks, or whatever organic matter they could consume and filter through their engineered bodies. Stark had been horrified. Since then, he had sent packages, some with tools, but most with food. Gaius had learned to pace himself. He did not need such meals, his body was built to endure on far less. But still, he accepted one now and again. He took a bite of the chicken. It was soft, tender, and rich with flavor. He chewed slowly, letting himself remember. For a moment, the war seemed far away. When the plate was cleared, he leaned back in the chair. His thoughts were quiet, steady. It is a strange gift, to taste such food again. Stark may be reckless, but he shows care in his own way. He stood, his armored plates hissing softly as they shifted with his movement. He had not fully removed his armor in months. In the warp, danger could appear without warning. Even here, in private, he carried the weight of ceramite. He knew his armor would soon need proper maintenance, but that would wait until they reached real space again. When he stepped into the corridor, a chapter serf was already waiting. The young man bowed quickly, eyes low. Lord Captain, the serf reported, voice respectful, the navigator says the warp has calmed. If the currents remain as they are, we will reach Terra within 1 to 3 weeks. Gaius gave a short nod. Understood. Return to your post. The serf bowed again and hurried off, leaving Gaius to continue down the long steel passage. But halfway through his walk, the shimmer appeared. The air before his eyes bent faintly, and the familiar symbols of the multiversal chat flickered into view. Lines of text hovered in the space only he could see. This time, it was not one of the members typing. It was the system itself. System message. Mission, help Saeko Busujima. Objective 1, escort and safeguard Saeko as the apocalypse begins. Ensure her survival. Objective 2, establish a safe base for humans. Optional, cleanse the dangers of the world. Additional reward. Reward, changes will be granted to the one who accepts. Gaius paused, reading each line. The system had given missions before, but never like this. He turned on his heel and walked quickly back to his chamber. When he entered, the chat was already alive with voices. Saeko, apocalypse? I don't see anything like that. Tony, if the system says it, then it's already starting. You just can't see it yet. Naruto, I want to accept, but I can't. I'm needed. Gaara's been taken. I have to save him. Mindy, I'm just normal. I can't do this one. Gaius placed his gauntlet hands on the table and typed his reply. I will accept the mission. Unless one of you wishes to. The answers came quickly. Naruto, I want to, but can't. Sad face. Mindy, no. Tony, looks like you, big guy. I'll back you with supplies. Just say what you need. Gaius, thank you. Before any more could be said, a new message from Saeko appeared. This one hurried. Saeko, someone attacked at the gate. He's crazed. A picture followed. The figure in it was bloodied, slack-jawed, and wrong. Tony reacted first. That's a zombie. Saeko, zombie? What is that? She's never heard the term. In her world, the concept doesn't exist. Gaius read as Stark explained in simple words, the dead rising again, spreading infection through bites, whole cities falling in days. Saiko's reply was short. Then we are in danger. Naruto's message followed fast. Be careful, Saeko. Mindy typed next. Do you want me to send you guns, Sister Saeko? There had been months of talk between them, months of sharing lives across impossible distances. They were close now, more like sisters than strangers. Saeko refused at first. I am a swordswoman. Guns are not my way. But Mindy did not give up. Then I'll send you a blade. Steel. Sharp. Better than wood. A pause, then Saiko's answer, thank you, Mindy. The chat slowed after that, each member taking in the weight of what had begun. Gaius sat in silence, reading, his thoughts steady. He had faced horrors across the stars, but each world carried its own burdens. Now it was Saiko's. Chapter 33 The School as a Base. The first wave of chaos had already passed the school gates. Screams echoed through the halls as terrified students and teachers ran in every direction, many tripping over one another or falling into the grasp of the undead. From the dojo, Saeko gripped her bukin tightly, eyes scanning the entrance. Then the lights flickered. A hum of power cut through the panic, followed by a sudden, intense presence. Saeko froze, her breath catching in her throat. Before her stood a figure she had only seen through the live feed, now real, and impossibly immense. Gaius Maximer Thasser. His MKX Tacticus pattern armor gleamed under the flickering fluorescent lights. The laurel crown on his helm marked him as extraordinary, and the power sword and bolter at his side left no doubt, he was unlike anyone she had ever seen. Mindy sent you a package, Blade Steel. We'll accept it. Yes or no? Saeko mentally pressed yes. Mindy's steel blade suddenly rested in her hand now, a gift that suddenly felt crucial. Gaius removed his helm with calm precision, placing it on the rear backpack mount with a satisfying click. He regarded her, voice steady and deep, hello, Saeko. Let's get going. Saiko's chest tightened with awe. Truly, nice to meet you, Gaius Maximer Thasser, she whispered, bowing slightly. Without waiting for further words, Gaius strode toward the school's main doors. The reinforced frame creaked and bent under his movement and size, but he ignored it, structural integrity would not matter for long. Outside, the chaos continued, students screaming, undead pressing forward, but his focus was absolute. Gaius's bolter spat fire into the first wave of zombies, shots precise, careful, cutting through the attackers without touching any student. The undead fell with a crunch, and the way cleared quickly. Saeko moved among the frightened students, checking for injuries and reassuring them where she could. A small group of students froze in awe. One girl, barely taller than half of Gaius's height in armor, pointed trembling fingers at him. Then, a thin boy with messy hair and glasses stepped forward, voice shaking but loud enough for others to hear. That's impossible. No one should move like that in armor that heavy. Is this even Earth technology? He paused, catching his breath, then continued, thank you for saving us. Gaius inclined his head slightly, acknowledging the boy. He did not react to the disbelief or the awe, he was not offended. Other students, seeing the example set by the boy, began to calm down and bow respectfully. They asked for help, and Gaius nodded. Population would be needed for the base, and he would not refuse. Saeko understood immediately, the lead was his and she accepted gladly. The hallways filled with more students as Gaius and Saeko moved forward, systematically clearing zombies. Saeko checked the stragglers while Gaius used his power sword, unpowered, relying on sheer physical force and sharpness of the sword, to cut through the undead efficiently. No ammunition wasted. Takashi and Rei were fighting a small group of zombies when Gaius appeared. He did not know them, nor did he pause for introductions. With precise shots, he eliminated the undead, threatening them, never missing, never endangering normal people. Takashi and Rei's eyes widened in shock as they saw the group of survivors lining up behind him. They immediately joined, bowing in recognition of the protection he provided. By now, the group had grown to 30 people, including students, teachers, and staff. Gaius looked around, the hallways were clear, and survivors were beginning to catch their breath. Saeko turned to him, relief in her voice, "The school will be the base." Gaius nodded, scanning the room with calm precision. Then, a teacher, Koichi Shido, one of the people he saved on the way here, stepped forward. His expression was defiant, but his tone carried worry. "Sir, you are not from our military, are you? I am the son of Ichiro Shido, the candidate minister cabinet. I need to know, where are you from?" Gaius's black eyes met his, cold and unyielding. "I am from nowhere of this place." Shido's brow furrowed. "Then, you have no authority here. These weapons, your armor, they should not be in Japan. We need people who belong here to take control, people like me." The students and staff all turned to watch, tense. Shido raised his voice, "Drop your weapons and leave. We cannot allow outsiders to lead." Gaius tilted his head slightly, studying him. He said nothing at first, then Gaius's lips curled into a brief, chilling smile, a soft head escaping his throat. In an instant, his expression turned serious. He stepped forward, closing the distance between himself and Shido. Gaius's towering height loomed over the teacher, casting a long shadow that engulfed Shido entirely. Despite being dwarfed by Gaius's imposing presence, Shido stood his ground, though a hint of fear flickered in his eyes. Gaius extended his hand, his gloved fingers wrapping around Shido's skull with terrifying ease. Shido's eyes widened in realization, and he stammered, "Yes, sir, I don't need it anymore, sir, I think you're better fit to it." But Gaius was unmoved. His grip tightened, and the pressure began to build. Shido's face contorted in agony as his skull creaked under the force. A high-pitched scream tore from his throat, a desperate plea for mercy that fell on deaf ears. His body dangled limply from Gaius's hand, legs kicking wildly as he fought against the inevitable. With a sickening crunch, Shido's skull gave way. Blood spurted from his eyes, nose, and mouth, painting Gaius's armor in a macabre red. The screams grew more intense, a symphony of horror that filled the room. Shido's body dangled violently, then went still. Gaius held the lifeless body in his hand, his black eyes fixed on the mangled remains. He turned his gaze towards the window, and with a powerful throw, sent Shido's body hurtling through the air. It crashed into the school wall with a thunderous bang, flattening against the surface before sliding down in a trail of blood. The screams of students erupted, some falling to their knees, others shielding their faces. Saeko, however, remained calm. She moved among them, her voice steady as she tried to soothe their frayed nerves. "Quiet," she commanded, her tone firm. "Panicking will only make things worse." Gaius's gaze swept the hall. He saw fear, yes, but also understanding. The danger outside was still real, and they can't leave by his side. Saiko's voice was steady. "This school will be our base. Stay together, stay alert, and follow the plan. Gaius will lead us." The students nodded, fear giving way to cautious resolve. The undead were still out there, but for now, they were safe inside. Gaius looked down at Saeko, acknowledging her, before turning to check the perimeter once more. Chapter 34 Cleaning the Floors. The classroom buzzed with quiet chatter as Saeko organized the students. They had been through the first wave of chaos at the school gates, and although they had made it inside relatively safe, the tension in the room was thick. Saeko moved among them, checking injuries and assigning roles. "Take care of the younger ones," she instructed one group. "Make sure everyone stays calm and stays together." Another group she directed to help those who had minor scrapes or cuts from the commotion outside. Her voice was firm but steady, giving them a sense of order they desperately needed. Saeko knew she had to keep them under control. Students began listening to her, their panic slowly giving way to cautious trust. Her authority had become a stabilizing presence, they trusted her more than Gaius, as especially what he has just done to one of their teacher. She could feel the weight of responsibility on her shoulders, but it gave her focus. Then she noticed movement near the classroom door. Gaius was leaving. The massive form of his armor shimmered in the dim light, the folds of the corridor making him look even larger. His power sword rested at his side, the bolter slung across his back. Despite having already seen him through live feed, witnessing him in person was truly different. Saiko's chest tightened. She felt a pull she hadn't expected, the same thrill that came with confronting danger head-on and killing. She turned to Rei and Takashi. "Take care of these students. Make sure no one leaves the room." They nodded quickly. "I'm going after him." Rei hesitated but ultimately obeyed, keeping watch as Saeko followed. Saeko did not speak, but her grip tightened around the grip of the blade that Mindy gifted her. The memories of the 4 years ago, and easily overpowering the man who tried to molest her and she severely injured him, pulsed through her like a dark current. Gaius, walking ahead, did not slow down. He sensed her presence, but said nothing, focusing on the methodical clearing of the school. The hallways were quiet, almost eerie, except for the faint moans and shuffling of the undead. Gaius moved with precision, his steps deliberate. A group of zombies blocked a doorway. Without powering his sword, he swung it with incredible strength, cleaving through them with ease. Heads rolled, limbs fell cleanly, and not a single shot from his bolter was wasted. A small group of zombies lunged from the stairs, the weapon barked sharply, a few precise rounds dropping them before they could reach him. Every movement was exact, and efficient. Down a side corridor, Gaius found a classroom where 3 figures were cornered, Saya, Kota, and Nurse Shizuka. The zombies were closing in, their movements slow but relentless. Gaius stepped forward, his bulk and presence enough to give pause even to the dead. The power sword cut through the first wave, unpowered yet impossibly strong. Kota's eyes went wide at the bolter. I've never seen a gun like that," he exclaimed. Saya and Shizuka could only stare, or written across their faces. The size of Gaius, the precision of his strikes, the way he moved as if the armor was barely a hindrance, it was unlike anything they had seen. They whispered to each other, speculating on his origins. "He's not from any military we know, maybe a secret experiment." Saya guessed especially the height and the strength needed to control the huge of a armor. "The armor, the weaponry, it doesn't match anything we have," Kota added. By the time Gaius finished clearing the room, 20 additional students and staff were safe. He gestured for them to follow, moving with the calm certainty of someone who had done this countless times. When he returned to the classroom, the mood was tense but organized. Students had started using their phones to contact relatives, faces pale and worried. One student had brought a TV from another room, and a broadcast played faintly in the corner. The reporter's voice was steady. "An infectious virus has spread globally. Citizens are advised to remain indoors and await rescue." Suddenly, the feed shifted. A zombie, tied to an ambulance bed, broke free and attacked people in the background. The camera fell, the broadcast cutting off abruptly. Students gasped and murmured, fear returning in waves. Saya's lips trembled. She looked at Gaius, her voice shaking but determined. Can you help save my parents?" she asked. Gaius shook his head, his voice firm. "No." Saya froze, the words sinking in. Then Gaius turned to Saeko. "What about your relatives?" he asked. Saiko's expression was calm. "My father is overseas. Strong enough to take care of himself as he is far stronger than me. I do not worry." Gaius nodded once, noting silently that Saeko was capable of protecting herself, so her father should be able to as well. Saya's eyes widened in frustration, realizing he had denied her while asking about Saeko. She opened her mouth to shout, but seeing the calm, measured expressions of both, she caught herself. I think," she corrected quickly, lowering her voice, "if we want a base, my family estate would be better than this school. It's large, well-stocked, and easily defended. The walls and gates can keep threats out, multiple rooms for sleeping, storing supplies, and keeping watch. If someone strong like you were here, we could survive and even plan rescues around the city easily." Gaius turned to Saeko for confirmation. She shrugged lightly. "I don't know the details. I just know it's large and luxurious." He looked back at Saya, black eyes sharp. "If you lied, there will be consequences." Saya met his gaze, unwavering. "It is true." The classroom, while still tense, had begun to settle. Students were quiet, listening, and starting to organize themselves under Saeko's instructions. Gaius prepared to leave again, heading to clear the rest of the floor. Saeko followed, driven not just by responsibility but by the thrill she felt in killing and feeling the flesh being sliced by the blade. The hierarchy was clear, Gaius led at the front, Saeko coordinated from beside him. Chapter 35 The Bus to Safety. The air inside the school had grown quieter since the last wave of screams and gunfire. The dead no longer roamed the upper floors, at least not in large numbers. Instead, only the echo of footsteps, the faint groan of the wounded, and the low hum of whispered conversations filled the space. Saeko walked beside Gaius down another hallway, her sword slick with drying blood. She kept her posture straight, her breathing steady. It wasn't just discipline that made her continue fighting, it was something else. Every time her blade cut through the undead, she felt a strange satisfaction, but she also does it for responsibility. She was responsible not only for her own survival, but also for the frightened students who now depended on her and Gaius. Gaius moved at a pace that was almost impossible to match. His armored bulk pushed through the halls, every swing of his unpowered sword tearing through the dead with ease. Saeko knew he didn't need her help. If he wanted, he could have finished clearing the school far more quickly without her slowing him down. Yet she followed anyway, not willing to stand aside while there was work to be done. On the lower floors, they found more of the undead, clusters caught on stairwells, a few stragglers wandering near classrooms. Gaius crushed them with precision. His boots thundered against the floor, the weight of his armor making every step sound like final judgment. Saeko's blade whistled through the air in contrast, fast and graceful, cutting down anything he left behind. By the time they had swept the first and second floors, dozens more survivors had been freed from locked classrooms and storage rooms. Their group was now close to 100, students, teachers, and staff gathered in one place, anxious and exhausted. That was when the true problem became clear. In the classroom they had secured as a gathering point, the size of the group pressed down on everyone. The room was crowded, the air stuffy from so many people breathing in fear. Gaius stood near the doorway, silent, watching. His gaze shifted over the sea of tired faces. He saw the weight of despair creeping back into them. Keeping them here was only delaying the inevitable, the school would not hold them forever. Saeko noticed it too. She gave short, calming instructions, moving from group to group, but even she could not ignore the question in her mind, how do we move them? If they tried to leave in small cars, the chances of survival would collapse. Too many inexperienced drivers, too many vehicles to protect. The streets outside were already crawling with the dead, and one mistake would mean disaster. Gaius finally turned without a word and left the room. Saeko, seeing the intent in his stride, let him go. She stayed behind to keep the survivors calm while he searched for an answer. The first floor was nearly empty now. The stench of blood and decay clung to the walls, the remains of the earlier fight scattered across the hallways. Gaius moved carefully, sword ready. Though most of the dead had been destroyed, he knew better than to assume, though even without it, he can easily crush these mindless moving rotting flesh easily with his strength. He stepped into the open grounds. The air outside was heavy, but quiet for now. Across the cracked asphalt of the parking area, he saw it, a large yellow school bus, parked neatly as though waiting for the morning bell. Gaius approached slowly, scanning for movement. No dead lurked nearby. The bus itself was intact, its windows unbroken, its tires firm. When he tried the door, it gave way easily with a creak. He ducked inside, filling the narrow space with his towering frame. The seats were dusty but serviceable, and the faint smell of old oil lingered in the air. On the dashboard, the key was still in the ignition. Gaius stared at it for a long moment, his expression unreadable behind his helm. This would work. Not perfectly, there were too many people for one trip, but it was safer than scattering them across small cars. A bus could carry 30 at a time, maybe more if pressed. It would mean 3 or 4 trips back and forth, but the risk of loss would be far lower. Satisfied, he stepped back down and made his way toward the classroom. When Gaius entered, Saeko met his eyes immediately. He gave a short gesture, asking her to step aside. She followed without hesitation. In the quieter corner of the hall, he spoke, his voice steady but low. There is a bus outside. Large enough to move them in groups. If we try with smaller cars, too many will die. Saeko nodded, listening closely. It will take 3, maybe 4 trips, he continued. But it is the only way. The school cannot be held for long. We will move them to the Takagi estate. The girl, Saya, claims it is better. Saiko's expression softened. She had thought the same, that the school was not a long-term refuge. You're right. The estate is the best choice we have. Then Saeko turned back toward the classroom. The room quieted as she stepped inside loudly to take attention of the people inside of the classroom. Survivors looked up, waiting. Saeko raised her voice enough for everyone to hear. Listen. We cannot stay here. The building is not safe forever. We will be moving to a stronger base. A school bus will take us in groups to the Takagi estate. The room stirred at her words. Some students whispered nervously, clutching their phones, while others looked relieved to finally have a direction. Saeko continued, firm but calm. We can't move everyone at once. The bus will take groups. Who will go first? For a moment, no one moved. Then, 3 students stood quickly. One of them, voice shaking but clear, said, My mother is at the Takagi estate. She told me they're letting in refugees. I want to go. The other 2 added similar reasons, speaking of family they hoped to reunite with. Their words sparked courage in others. Soon, 25 students gathered at the front, ready to be part of the first group. Saeko nodded to them, then looked at the rest. The rest of you will wait here until we return. Stay calm. Stay together. The chosen group moved through the hall in silence, Saeko leading them. The corpses of the undead lay scattered from the earlier battles, bodies sliced apart by her blade, smashed to pulp beneath Gaius's boots. The students walked timidly, their shoes slipping slightly on dried blood. A few gagged at the stench. Some whispered nervously about Gaius, their eyes flicking to the walls where bullet holes marked his passing. Others kept their eyes firmly on the ground, unwilling to look too closely at the carnage. At the end of the hall, the sunlight spilled in, and the sight of the waiting bus came into view. Gaius stood beside it, a towering sentinel of metal and power. The bus was nearly 12 feet tall, and even so, the armored giant reached almost to its roof and his expressionless face. His presence alone made several of the students falter in their steps. The memory of what he had done to their teacher, Shido, still lingered in their minds. The brutal finality of it. The raw strength. For some, the image made their stomachs turn. They walked timidly past him, climbing the steps of the bus one by one. A few trembled as they passed, unable to meet his gaze. Gaius said nothing. He only stood, silent and watchful, as the first group boarded. His black eyes scanned them. Saeko followed the last student aboard, her blade resting at her side. She glanced once at Gaius, then back at the frightened but determined faces inside the bus. Chapter 36 The Road to the Estate. The bus engine rumbled to life, its low growl filling the silence of the school grounds. Survivors sat huddled in the rows of faded seats, their faces pale, their eyes darting from one broken window to another. The wide yellow frame of the bus felt out of place in the ruins of the city, as though it had been pulled out of a normal school day and dropped into a nightmare. The driver, a middle-aged staff member with graying hair and tired eyes, gripped the steering wheel firmly. He had been one of the few to step forward when Saeko asked for a volunteer. He explained he had years of experience driving buses on school trips, and though fear flickered in his gaze, his voice had been steady when he said, "I'll do it." In the front passenger seat lies Gaius standing up. His armored frame took up more than one place, forcing him to angle his shoulders carefully and lowering his head to fit in. Even standing, his presence dominated the front of the bus. The driver cast nervous glances at him now and then, clearly uneasy with the massive figure sitting so close, but Gaius remained silent and still. The bus lurched forward. Survivors shifted uneasily, some whispering, others clutching bags of belongings close to their chests. Outside, the streets rolled past, littered with abandoned cars, shattered glass, and the shambling dead that turned their heads slowly at the sound of the engine. Saeko walked down the aisle, checking on the younger students, offering quiet words of reassurance. When she returned to the front, she crouched slightly beside Gaius so her voice would not carry too far. "We should stop at a convenience store," she said softly. "The survivors are hungry, and many need the bathroom. It would help them keep calm." Gaius's dark eyes shifted toward the rows of tired faces. He studied them for a long moment. Some clutched their stomachs, others tried to ignore the discomfort on their faces. After a pause, he nodded once. Saeko rose and stepped closer to the driver. "Pull over at the next convenience store," she instructed. It will be better for everyone if we stop. The driver glanced at her in the mirror, then nodded without a word. The bus rolled to a stop outside a small corner store. Its sign was cracked, one of the glass windows broken inward, leaving shards scattered across the ground. The air was still, heavy with the faint stench of decay. Gaius rose first, ducking his head so as not to scrape the roof as he stepped out. The pavement cracked faintly under the weight of his boots. From the side street, a lone figure stumbled forward. Its skin hung in tatters, jaw lolling loosely. The groan it gave was low but carried across the silence. "Watch out!" Saya's voice rang sharply from inside the bus. She pressed a hand against the window, eyes wide. "A zombie's coming." Gaius didn't draw his sword. He waited, still and calm, as the creature staggered closer. Its outstretched arms reached for him. With one swift motion, Gaius caught its head in his hand. There was a sickening crunch as he squeezed, the skull collapsing like a rotten fruit. The body crumpled instantly to the ground, lifeless. Gasps echoed from the bus. Some students covered their mouths in shock, while others stared wide-eyed at the ease with which he ended the threat. To them, it had looked as simple as swatting a fly. Gaius said nothing. He let the body drop at his feet and turned his gaze to the store. Inside, shadows stretched long across the aisles. A handful of zombies shuffled between the shelves, their movements slow, their clothes stained. Saeko darted forward, her sword flashing. Each strike was clean, her blade cutting through necks and torsos with practiced precision. Gaius moved in behind her, his unpowered sword swinging with heavy arcs. The impact of each strike shattered bones and split bodies, knocking the dead aside with brutal force. The fight was over in less than a minute. Silence returned, broken only by the faint hum of the refrigerator units that still worked. "Clear," Saeko said, lowering her blade. The survivors were guided off the bus in groups. Some rushed for the shelves, grabbing bottled water, canned food, and snack bars. A teacher organized a line at the back for the bathroom. Others filled bags with whatever they could find, instant noodles, crackers, even small boxes of fruit juice. Gaius stood watch by the doorway, scanning the street beyond, sword still in hand. He didn't move as the minutes passed, his presence a silent barrier that kept the survivors calm. When the last group finished and returned to the bus, Saeko lingered behind. She carried a small chocolate bar, its wrapper slightly torn. She walked up to Gaius, her expression softer than before. "You should try this," she said, holding it out. "It'll help after all this." Gaius looked at the small bar in her hand, then at her. Slowly, he reached out and took it. The wrapper crinkled as he broke it apart and ate it. The sweetness filled his mouth, a stark contrast to the dust and blood that clung to the air. Saeko smiled faintly. "Good, isn't it?" Without answering, Gaius finished it, then accepted a second one when she offered. Only then did he speak, his voice calm and steady. "We should keep moving." Saeko gave a small nod, still smiling as she turned back toward the bus. The bus rumbled back onto the road. Saya sat near the front, giving directions to the driver, her voice sharp but steady as she guided them toward the Takagi estate. The streets grew worse the further they went. Abandoned cars clogged intersections, some burned out, others still stained with dried blood. Groups of zombies wandered aimlessly, drawn by the noise of the engine. Several times, the driver had to stop. Each time, Gaius and Saeko stepped out. Saiko's blade danced through the air, slicing cleanly. Gaius waded forward like an unstoppable wall, scattering the dead with each swing of his sword. Survivors watched from inside the bus, whispering in awe and fear. Time passed this way, the sun dipping lower in the sky. Finally, the walls of the Takagi estate came into view, tall and imposing, ringed with barbed wire. Relief washed over the bus. Some students whispered prayers, others clutched the hands of their friends. For the first time in days, hope seemed close. But as they neared the gate, a harsh voice blasted from a loudspeaker. "Stop where you are! Do not come closer or we will shoot!" The bus jolted to a halt. Survivors ducked instinctively, fear flashing across their faces. Armed guards emerged from behind the gate, rifles raised. They moved cautiously toward the bus, their eyes narrowing. Gaius rose. He carefully stepped out, angling his broad shoulders so as not to damage the bus doorway. The ground seemed to shake under his weight. The guards froze at the sight of him. Several lowered their rifles without thinking, while others stared in disbelief. One man, clearly the leader, steadied his aim and pointed his rifle directly at Gaius's head. His voice shook but carried authority. "Who are you?" Gaius met his eyes, his expression calm. His deep voice was steady. "Put down the gun." The leader's hands trembled. The guards shifted, uncertain, caught between fear and duty. Then Saya's voice rang out from behind Gaius, sharp and clear, "It's me. Saya Takagi. Take me to my parents." She stepped off the bus, standing tall. The guards blinked, stunned. Murmurs broke out among them. Slowly, rifles lowered. The great gates of the Takagi estate began to creak open. Chapter 37 Meeting at the estate. The heavy bus rolled slowly through the open gates of the Takagi estate. The iron doors groaned on their hinges before shutting tight again, sealing the survivors inside. Beyond the walls lay chaos and ruin, but within stood tall buildings, ordered paths, and men with rifles patrolling as if it were a fortress rather than a family home. The students and staff stepped down from the bus one by one. Some looked relieved, their shoulders sagging as if a weight had lifted. Others stayed tense, eyes darting around at the guards, the walls, the sight of armed men watching them. The estate was not just shelter, it was a base with power. Saeko walked beside Gaius, calm as ever, her sword at her side. Saya, however, barely looked around. Her gaze went straight to the mansion at the center of the grounds. This was her home. From the wide steps of the mansion came Soichiro Takagi, tall, broad-shouldered, his presence commanding. At his side walked Yuriko, his wife, elegant yet firm, her calmness balancing his stern expression. A group of guards followed, weapons ready, though their eyes kept flicking toward the towering figure of Gaius. Yuriko quickened her pace as soon as she saw Saya. "Saya!" Her voice carried warmth, and before her daughter could protest, she pulled her into an embrace. Saya froze for a moment, embarrassed, but did not push her away. Yuriko whispered something softly, and Saya's face softened just slightly. Soichiro did not move toward his daughter. His gaze stayed fixed on Gaius, the giant in blue and gold armor. The guards shifted uneasily, fingers brushing triggers, but their leader raised a hand, holding them back. Gaius stepped forward, the weight of his presence filling the courtyard. His voice was steady, carrying without effort. "From this point onward, this base is under my control." The words made the guards stiffen, several raising their rifles in instinct. The survivors behind the bus gasped, whispers rising. Soichiro did not flinch. His eyes narrowed, but his stance stayed calm. He raised his hand again, and the guards reluctantly lowered their weapons. After a moment's pause, he replied. "We might need to talk in my office." He turned to one of his men. "Escort the survivors to the quarters. Follow procedure." Gaius tilted his head slightly. "What procedure?" Soichiro's voice was level. "Everyone who enters is inspected for bite marks. We cannot risk infection spreading inside these walls." Gaius gave a single nod. "I see." The survivors were guided away. Some looked nervous at the word inspection, but most followed quietly, relieved to finally find walls, beds, and their relatives inside these walls. Saeko stayed near Gaius, while Yuriko guided Saya gently toward the mansion. Soichiro gestured toward the doors. "This way." Inside, the mansion felt both grand and practical. Wide halls stretched under high ceilings, decorated with signs of wealth but also adapted for survival. Heavy curtains were tied back to let in light, but sandbags and wooden planks reinforced windows. The air smelled faintly of polish, steel, and cooked food. Soichiro led Gaius deeper into the house, past patrolling guards, until they reached his private office. The door closed behind them, leaving only the two men. Soichiro walked to a small side table where a heater and cups were set. "Tea or coffee?" "Coffee," Gaius replied. Soichiro poured 2 cups, setting one in front of the massive warrior. Gaius sat carefully on a reinforced chair, his sheer size making the furniture look small. Even seated, he loomed, but his movements were measured, deliberate. Soichiro sat across from him, resting his hands on his knees. For a long moment, they regarded each other. Finally, Soichiro spoke. "Sir, I will agree to it. But first, let me ask, who are you?" Gaius met his gaze without hesitation. His voice was deep but not harsh. "I am an Ultramarine. A space marine of the Imperium of Man." The words carried little meaning to Soichiro, but their weight was clear. He frowned slightly. Space. Marine. You're not from Earth, are you? No, Gaius answered simply. I am not of this world. Suichiro leaned back slightly, studying him. Then are you an alien? Or are there humans beyond Earth? Gaius shook his head slowly. No. I am no alien. I was born human, as you were. The Emperor remade me into what you see now, stronger, taller, yes. But still of mankind. Always of mankind. He paused, his voice steady. Among my brothers, to call us alien would mean death. But you did not know. So I tell you now, plainly. Suichiro stiffened at the warning, but then gave a short nod, acknowledging it. I see. Thank you for the clarity. Silence stretched for a moment, broken only by the faint hiss of the heater. Suichiro set down his cup and stood. He walked to the window, pulling the curtain slightly to show the estate grounds below. This is my family's estate, he said. More a fortress than a home now. Behind these walls are wide halls, meeting rooms, stores of food and medicine, and quarters enough for many families. I have gathered 20 to 30 armed men to guard the gates and patrol the grounds. Inside are 50 civilians, mothers, children, the elderly. They depend on strength in order to survive. He turned back, his gaze sharp. If you are to take command here, you must prove you can lead not only with strength, but with order. Gaius listened quietly before answering. I see. You need not worry. I am an Ultramarine, son of a Primarch. We are not only warriors, but also leaders. Where others bring only the sword, we bring wisdom and discipline. This refuge will not fall as long as I stand here. Suichiro studied him for a long time. Then, with a firm step forward, he extended his hand. Gaius looked at it for a moment before reaching out. His grip was strong, but controlled. The two men, one of steel and one of flesh, sealed an unspoken pact. The estate had a new leader. Chapter 38 The Announcement. The morning sun cut across the estate walls, bathing the courtyard in pale gold. The survivors were already awake, moving about with quiet energy. Some carried water from the well, others prepared food, and a few guards walked their patrols. Even in this fragile new world, routine gave comfort. Gaius walked beside Suichiro through the paved path that led to the central square. His armored boots pressed down firmly, every step heavy yet controlled. The man beside him matched his stride, tall and commanding, but still dwarfed by Gaius's presence. The closer they came to the square, the more eyes turned to follow them. Whispers spread among the people. Children peeked from behind their mothers. Guards at their posts stiffened, their hands brushing against the grips of their rifles though none raised them. They were not afraid of attack, they were simply overwhelmed. The stranger from yesterday, the giant in blue armor, was walking openly with Suichiro. Gaius said nothing as they moved. His eyes scanned the estate walls, the rooftops, the open ground of the yard. He was already cataloguing defensive weak points, noting how wagons or barricades might block the entrance, where the walls could be reinforced, how a proper defense could be built. In his mind, he saw a fortress rising in place of this estate. He knew it could be done. The problem was time. When they reached the square, Suichiro raised his hand. His voice, sharpened from years of commanding both family and men, carried across the open space. Everyone, gather! The order echoed. Guards repeated it down the walkways. Survivors stopped what they were doing and moved toward the square. In minutes, dozens of men, women, and children filled the space. Those on the walls leaned over the edge to listen. Gaius stood still, silent as a statue, letting Suichiro's presence settle the crowd. Suichiro's voice rang out again. Listen well. This man beside me is no ordinary fighter. He is a soldier, disciplined, trained, and far more experienced in war than any of us. From this day forward, he will take command of our defenses. His word is my word. Follow his orders, and together, we will survive. The crowd broke into murmurs. Some exchanged uneasy glances. Others nodded, reassured by Suichiro's certainty. But the moment of doubt hung in the air, waiting. Gaius stepped forward. When he spoke, his voice was deep, calm, and steady. It was not loud, but every ear heard it clearly. I have fought wars far worse than this. Compared to what I've faced, these walking corpses are nothing. You don't need to fear them while I'm here. All I ask is that you listen, stay disciplined, and work together. Do this, and I will make sure this place holds strong. You will live to see the sun rise, day after day. Silence stretched across the square. For a moment, no one moved. Then a man near the front, one of the older survivors, clapped his hands together. The sound echoed in the stillness. Another joined him. Then another. In moments, the square filled with applause. The guards on the walls pounded their fists against the stone in rhythm. A wave of relief washed over the survivors, replacing their fear with hope. Suichiro gave a short nod of satisfaction. The announcement had worked. The next day passed in steady motion. The remaining students and staff who had been left behind at the school were transferred safely to the estate. Guards escorted them, making several trips until every last one was inside the walls. The population of the estate swelled past hundreds. For the first time since the outbreak began, the survivors felt something close to stability. Meals were served at regular times. Guards rotated on a proper schedule. Families were given rooms, and children had space to rest without fear of attack. Gaius spent most of the day inside a study, surrounded by maps of the estate and the surrounding city. His eyes moved across the documents at inhuman speed, memorizing every line, every street, every storage record. He knew the exact number of canned goods in the pantry, the amount of fuel in the reserve tanks, and the distance to the nearest river. He understood the estate could become a true fortress, but the work would take weeks, maybe months. Time was the one resource he didn't have. When night fell, Gaius sat alone in a quiet room. With a thought, the Multiversal Chat Group opened before his eyes. Messages scrolled past. Saeko had posted an update about her patrol, describing the thinning numbers of zombies near the outer walls of the estate. Naruto's usual enthusiastic words filled the feed, encouragement, reminders never to give up. Mindy also cheered Saeko as well, as always. Then Tony Stark's name lit up the screen. Gaius typed, "Stark, send me weapons, guns, and a huge amount of ammunition." The reply came almost instantly. "Sure." Notifications appeared one after another. "Tony Stark sent you a package M4X10 accept? Yes/no. Tony Stark sent you a package HK416X10 accept? Yes/no. Tony Stark sent you a package FN Scar X10 accept? Yes/no. Tony Stark sent you a package Barrett M82X10 accept? Yes/no. Tony Stark sent you a package FN Minimi X10 accept? Yes/no. Tony Stark sent you a package Sig Sauer X10 accept? Yes/no. And many more, along with crates of ammunition and grenades. It didn't surprise Gaius. Tony had likely predicted they might need many weapons and ammunition since it's an apocalypse from zombies and prepared a stockpile just for this moment. Gaius closed the chat after thanking Tony Stark. His mind already pictured where the new weapons would be stored. He remembered the warehouses he had studied on the maps. He would need Suichiro with him. The next morning, Gaius and Suichiro walked toward the largest empty warehouse at the far end of the estate. The building was vast, its sliding metal doors closed and rusted at the hinges. Suichiro looked puzzled. "Why here, Sir Gaius?" Gaius had told him before to simply call him by name, but Suichiro refused to drop the title. "I have received a gift from a friend," Gaius answered simply. Inside, the warehouse was empty. Dust clung to the corners, and the echo of their steps carried through the hollow space. Gaius closed his eyes for a brief moment. In his mind, he clicked yes again and again, his focus sharp and quick as lightning. The air shimmered. One by one, weapons began to appear. Rifles stacked neatly in rows, machine guns set in heavy crates, sniper rifles placed carefully on racks. Ammunition boxes formed towers along the walls. Grenades filled metal containers. Suichiro's eyes widened. He stood frozen, trying to keep his composure, but even he couldn't hide the shock. Row after row filled the warehouse until it looked less like storage and more like an armory. Suichiro let out a breath. "So it is true, you are truly a marine from space." Gaius didn't answer the remark. His gaze swept over the endless stockpiles. This was enough firepower to arm an army, not just a few dozen guards. He turned to Suichiro. "Call your men. Arm them immediately. Organize them into proper squads. The time for makeshift defense is over." Suichiro nodded, his voice steady but his eyes still lit with excitement. With these weapons, the estate no longer had to hide. They could fight. And as Gaius watched the warehouse fill with steel and firepower, he knew the next phase had begun. Chapter 39 The Pulse in the Sky. The late afternoon sun slanted across the Takagi estate, casting long shadows over the training yard and the high stone walls. The smell of gunpowder hung in the air, sharp and metallic. Men and older students lined the firing lanes that had been set up near the outer wall. Rifles cracked in steady bursts, the sound echoing across the grounds like distant thunder. Gaius stood behind them, his blue armor gleaming in the fading light. He watched each shooter with the stillness of a statue. When someone jerked the trigger too hard, he will correct them, his deep voice calm and exact. Slow your breathing. Squeeze, don't pull. The shooter nodded quickly and corrected his stance. Suichiro and Yuriko watched from a raised patio. They spoke quietly, but their pride showed in their faces. The estate's people, students, guards, ordinary survivors, were learning to fight. Saya stood a short distance away, arms folded, eyes sharp as she counted each burst of fire and mentally measured the ammunition they were using. Her expression said what she didn't voice, "We'll need to watch our stock if this keeps up." Saya knew the ammunition and guns came from Gaius, but she also understood the supplies were limited. The thought that they might run out before even starting the citywide rescue made her uneasy. She didn't know the supplies came from Tony Stark, a former arms dealer with access to military supplies. With Tony able to provide or purchase weapons anytime, Gaius had no reason to worry about running out. When the last magazine emptied, Gaius called a halt. The men cleared their weapons and formed up quickly, their movements already more disciplined than the morning. He nodded once, the small gesture carrying approval. By evening, the main hall of the mansion had become a planning room. A wide table was covered with city maps and sheets of notes. Lanterns gave a soft, steady light, enough for everyone to see. Gaius stood at the head of the table. Saeko rested one hand on the map's edge, while Suichiro and Yuriko sat opposite him. Saya leaned forward, a pencil in hand, ready to mark routes. "We'll need to move into the city," Suichiro said, voice low but firm. "There are survivors out there. We can't leave them." Saeko nodded. "Small scouting teams first. Quiet and fast. A larger group will cover more ground," Suichiro countered. If he was still the head, he wouldn't allow anyone going against his order, but Gaius is now the one who controls the estate. Gaius listened without interrupting, his eyes moving across the map. Finally, he tapped a finger against a main road. "Both ideas have merit. We'll secure vehicles first and set fallback points along these streets. Scouting teams will move ahead, but we'll have support ready if they meet heavy numbers." The others exchanged looks, then nodded. It was a plan that fit the man, precise and measured. A faint hum cut through the room. The television in the corner, left on for background news, buzzed once and went black. Lanterns stayed lit, but the small radio on a side table clicked and died. The soft background noise of the estate, distant music, a generator's thrum, stopped all at once. Saya straightened sharply. "That's not a simple outage, a EMP." She pulled her phone from her pocket and pressed the power button. Nothing. No light, no sound. Her brow furrowed. Saiko's eyes narrowed. "EMP." Saya looked up, her voice steady and certain. A EMP is when a nuclear warhead detonated high in the atmosphere. It created an electromagnetic pulse. That surge fries circuits and kills anything electronic, phones, radios, even cars with modern chips. That's why every electronic just went dead. The room went quiet. Yuriko's face turned serious, and Suichiro's hands tightened into fists on the table. Gaius remained as he was, his expression unreadable but his gaze sharper. He rose to his full height. "It seems I have to speed things up and change the plan." He turned to Suichiro. "Calm the survivors. Make sure no one panics. Double the watch on the walls." Suichiro nodded once and left at a brisk pace. A soft knock broke the silence. One of the housemaids stepped in, bowing quickly before moving aside. Behind her stood two familiar figures, Rei Miyamoto and Takashi Komuro, the students Gaius had pulled from the school days before. They bowed deeply. Rei spoke first, her voice respectful but heavy with worry. "Sir, we want to leave the estate to look for our parents. We can't contact them anymore. Thank you for saving us." Takashi added, "We need to at least try." Gaius studied them for a long moment. He saw the resolve in their eyes, the kind born from love and fear mixed together. He also knew the truth, their chances of survival alone in the corpse-filled city were thin. Finally, he said, "Don't leave. We have a plan to rescue survivors in the city and to clear the dead. If you want to find your parents, it's better to join the militia inside the estate." The two exchanged a surprised glance. Takashi's jaw tightened, then he nodded. Rei followed with a small but firm nod of her own. Soichiro, returning at that moment, heard the last words. Gaius turned to him. "Have them join the militia and join the training immediately." "Yes," Soichiro replied. He faced the students. "Come with me." Rei and Takashi bowed again, their earlier tension replaced with a spark of purpose, and followed him out. Gaius stepped outside into the evening air. The sky was a deep orange near the horizon, fading to dark blue above. From the outer walls came the sharp, rolling sound of rifle fire. He walked toward the gate. The closer he came, the stronger the smell of burnt powder and decay. Piles of dead stretched along the outer road, bodies stacked where they had fallen to the day's target practice. The militia kept firing at any zombie that staggered too near, their movements confident after hours of training. "Cease fire," Gaius called, his deep voice carrying easily. The guns went silent. The men turned and quickly formed a line, boots clicking together. "Sir!" they said as one, raising their hands in a sharp salute. Gaius stepped forward, his eyes moving over the field of corpses. "Search the nearby houses for vehicles that still work. We need them to move these bodies and burn them far from the estate. Do not burn near the walls, the smoke will choke our people." "Yes, sir." The men split into small teams at once, rifles ready as they moved toward the darkened neighborhood beyond the gates. The sound of their boots faded into the distance. From his place at the gate, Gaius looked out at the quiet, empty streets. He knew that the long hours of gunfire would inevitably draw attention, and not only from the dead who roamed the city. The constant echo of shots could easily reach the ears of desperate survivors, and many might wander closer to this area under the belief that a military base or a secure shelter was nearby. Because of this, Gaius would not be surprised if any of the men he had ordered to search for vehicles also ended up encountering survivors along the way. It was something he had already considered, something he had expected.
Thanks for listening.